pursuit of greatness begins at first light and never, ever ends. Time is the enemy, the ally, and the holy grail of every race car driver. Who will be victorious? Only time will tell. Let's go.
It is the month of May, which means one thing: a trip to the Brickyard. It is in this month where the best open-wheel racers in all the world migrate their way to this Howell 2.5-mile facility. It is every driver's dream to win at this track, and for more than 100 years of history and names have all been built here at the Yard of Bricks. And now, the Major Series looks to add to its history here today. The Indianapolis 500-mile race starts now. Hello everyone and welcome to iRacing's virtual Indianapolis Motor Speedway for the 6th race of the Major Series European Regions Pro Split season for the Majors Indy 500 live on the Global Sim Racing channel. I'm Justin Prince. Alongside the booth today is Chad Irvine, along with Christian Challoner. Behind the scenes is our director Sean Ambrose, and he's using cameras provided by Dougie Beard. Now, let's take the opportunity to learn more about this facility with our GSRC track guide.
Back home again in Indiana, and it seems that I can see our guide around the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. The first motorsports competition at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway took place in 1909. The track's original surface of crushed stone and tar proved problematic. The owners paved the track with more than 3 million bricks, giving rise to the nickname the Brickyard. Indy isn't known for its banking, with only 9 degrees of banking in all 4 corners. Indy is unique because those 4 corners are individual corners. Each is separated by a short chute. Turn 1, you find yourself battling tunnel vision with the grandstands and pit road on both sides of the track closing in as you're trying to hit your mark. Turn 2 and down the backstretch, the drivers are often facing wind. Turns 3 and 4, also known as the north end of the speedway, flow exactly like turns 1 and 2. Surviving 2 world wars, 10 popes, and older than sliced bread, Indianapolis Motor Speedway is the most historic racing venue in America. Stepping onto the hallowed grounds of Indy, you feel over the 100 years of history. Winning at Indy requires all of the luck, skill, drive, and determination that you have. Many have come to taste the milk and have left empty-handed. The Yard of Bricks at the start-finish line pays tribute to the original surface. Kissing the bricks at Indianapolis Motor Speedway after your victory has quickly become an Indy tradition. With that being said, that's just scratching the surface of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And when you think about it, all these drivers are just chasing a glass of milk over 3 feet of bricks. It's amazing how those simple things mean so much to so many people. This has been our guide to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Strap on in and enjoy the show.
That's a look at your GSRC track guide for Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Now let's bring in Chad as we get ready to go racing here at the Brickyard, a very prestigious racetrack. Your expectations, first of all, for this race today, Chad?
Well, I'm going to have to see how things start out here. It's a long race. 500 miles in these cars is very, very difficult, especially with such close quarters and with the skill level of these drivers. It's a 2.5-mile oval, mostly asphalt with, of course, that yard of bricks, 9 degrees banking in the turns. And definitely a fun track to drive and certainly a fantastic one to watch a race at as well. So going to have a fun one here today, and man, I'm just so looking forward to it.
You're actually here at this facility, in fact, yesterday for the Rear World GP on the road course. We'll get to talking about that a little bit later on today, but so far the driver standings have been very tight, specifically for the pro driver standings, with Tim Claessens leading by just 5 points entering today's round over Handsome Pete. Dallas Pataska enters today 11 points back. He's one of the favorites for today's action, with Eric Mickey in 4th position. Rounding out the top 5 of the point standings entering today is Kirk Crum, the 2018 Majors Indy 500 winner here at this facility. Then, in the sportsman side of things, it's Adam Facciaponte entering today with 73 total points. That's an 8-point advantage over a tie between Sean Brown and Eric Freak. Then you have Mike Gaunt in 3rd position. A tie for 4th position, 17 points back between Brandon Clunge and Colin Ward. And Brian Broomstraw is 18 points back entering today in the 5th position. Then, when it comes to the legend standings, Richie Hearn enters today with experience here at this racetrack in the real world, competing in Indy 500s in the 1990s. He has a 3-point advantage over David Baker. Bob Beltrami, one of the favorites for today, 15 points back in 3rd. Trey Partridge and Claude Belval are 16 points back in 4th. Then Rob Gall rounds out the top 5 in the point standings, 44 points behind. The Legend Sports standings, meanwhile, see Colin Ward have the points lead with 56 total on the season. Peter Dolmayer is 5 points behind, with Jan Brony in 9 points back in 3rd position. Wolf Dietrich Otto is 13 points behind in 4th. Simon Thorns rounds out the top 5 in the Legend Sport standings. Now, when it comes to the team side of things, Christian, things have been very tight, but been very dominant for 2 organizations so far throughout the campaign. They both are up at the top of the standings.
Yeah, absolutely. No real surprise to see the Grizzly TFR teams both still in command of the championship, 1st and 2nd. A little bit more of a gap now between Daytona and Le Mans. 32 points back to 2nd for the Le Mans team. Bombshell Racing falling back a little bit as well in 3rd. They're 83 points back. Dog Bear Europe now over 100 points behind, 116 back in 4th, with Team Mad 185 back in 5th. But moving to our Team Sportsman standings, we have Mr. Apex F1 Podcast Team 1 are still in the lead of this championship, but now by 55 points over Hanson Brothers Racing. HW Racing 94 points back, so still within 100 of the lead there, but starting to slip back a little bit. Grizzly TFR Daytona Jr. not having as good a run as their sister team in the pro team standings, but still inside the top 5 back there in 4th. And Black Tree Race Crew have taken over 5th and are 146 points back.
That's a look at your standings entering today's round. As drivers have wrapped up their drivers' meeting, drivers are getting ready to race for 500 miles tonight. Let's take a look at your details as we get ready for 200 laps on the docket, Chad.
Yep, 200 laps in the IR18. That's the current up-to-date version of the IndyCar with the aero screen. At 200 laps with open setups, there is the incident limit at 26. And of course, you run what you brung, only one car, no fast repairs here at Indy.
Our words, no mistakes for these competitors for today. We'll see how things fare out. We're approaching 5 minutes to go in final practice, where it's Udis Pateklos who leads the board with the 39.183. Then it's Thomas Geisler, 39.234. Joshua Wolf, Bob Beltrami, David Lochke rounds out the top 5 at the moment. But Christian, I turn to you as someone who won here in 2019. What does it take to win at this racetrack if you want to succeed? Is it about the speed? Is it about the precision? What is it all about when it comes to trying to win here?
It's actually pretty similar to trying to win at Daytona in the sense of what your goal is really positioning for the end of the race, and you're kind of thinking about that the whole way from the beginning. So say if you start outside of the top 10 or whatnot, you know it's going to be pretty difficult to move your way forwards. It's always really, really hard to pass in these cars and at this racetrack. So you kind of start trying to work out what the strategy is sort of from back to front. And that's really your goal. You want to be inside the top 5, preferably actually inside the top 3, with say maybe 10 to 15 laps to go, and that's really kind of when you have an opportunity. If you're not inside the top 5, unless there's a caution and a restart, it's very, very difficult to win this race. It's mostly track position and strategy, and actually a little bit less about what you're actually doing out there on track until it comes down to those last 10 to 15 laps.
And Chad, you're here at this facility just yesterday. What is it like to be at this racetrack, knowing the prestige and the history that's taken place here, and knowing this is your home track as well?
It's incredible knowing that to have such a great facility as your home track. Very blessed to have that be the case, and it's very different than any other racetrack I have been to. I've been to Gateway, I've been to Michigan International. It's just so different, the size of it all, the history of it, just everything that surrounds you, you can go back and touch and see, and it's all historic. It's all incredible, especially they have the fantastic museum in the infield as well. They're on the infield just inside of the South Short Chute. They do a great job of just keeping this facility looking beautiful, and it's so much fun to be at this facility for racing, whether it's on the road course or the oval.
Absolutely. Whenever you come here, you can feel the prestige and the history that's around you. But many drivers today look to try and carry a lot of speed here. Speeds of 235 plus miles an hour down the straightaways. And Christian, today that speed and balance is going to be important, because there's a saying when it comes to open setups, when it comes to Indianapolis. You take as much downforce out as you can that you can handle, so you have a lot of straight line speed. And for some, it's in the 230s. For some, it's nearly up to 240 miles an hour for today.
Yeah, so for qualifying, obviously, you really, really do want to trim out, and they're always on an absolute knife edge, especially through the 4-lap qual. What you'll actually see quite often is cars that look quite good for 1 or 2 laps, and then they'll start to fade a little bit on lap 3. And by the time you get to the end of lap 4, they can actually be pretty close to undrivable. So qualifying with a 4-lap average is a completely unique thing, I would say, to this racetrack. We don't really see it for anything else, and it's very, very challenging. It's strange to say that kind of being wide open around a racetrack would be challenging, but certainly for Indianapolis, it absolutely is, especially that 4th lap, and that's really critical to the qualifying run. When it comes to racing, it is, as you say, it's a balance between how much downforce you have versus obviously how much drag you're producing. You want to have as efficient aero as possible, but some of the parts that are kind of necessary for downforce so that you can actually run comfortably, I would say, in hot conditions, are obviously quite draggy as well. So it's definitely a difficult one to set up for. Personally, I kind of always go for the comfort option, because I feel like being able to place the car is more important than raw pace. And you do have the option to kind of trim the wings a little bit on pit stops, but once you start the race, you are kind of pinned into what you've chosen. There isn't a massive amount of deviation you can make from your initial setup.
As drivers wrap up their practice session, I'd like to remind you this race is in support of the Charity McMillan Cancer Support. Knowing they won't rest and they won't settle for anything other than the best possible support for people with cancer. They do whatever it takes. For more information or to donate, go to macmillan.org.uk. Just a few moments to go in final practice. Your expectations, Chad, for qualifying, as we are expecting a very stacked field for the major series for this year's Indy 500.
The biggest thing to watch in qualifying, as Christian just talked about, is that drop-off. Lap 1s are pretty... You can get them all pretty fairly even. There's only so much you can really do with these cars to get them set. But the issue comes in with tire wear and just seeing how much the car falls off over the 4-lap run. I'd probably say a solid setup and solid driver would be averaging maybe about a 0.4 of a second drop off from first lap to last lap. But it can definitely vary. You can see some very quick first and second laps and a huge drop off for lap 4. Just going to all come down to the setup and how aggressive the driver is, especially with track temps right now, 101 degrees on the track temp. That's not the hottest I've seen here. Doing some of the fixed Indy 500, I was seeing it up to about 120. So definitely a cooler track temperature for today, and it's going to make things fun to watch as cars start to get rolling for qualifying.
Yes, indeed, they are rolling out for qualifying, and one of the more recent updates to iRacing included the ability to in-sim track 4 clean lap averages, meaning if you do not get 4 clean laps here at this racetrack for any reason, you do not set a qualifying lap at all. It sets up an average, Christian, and before you had to manually track that via spreadsheet. Now, you have the ability to be able to track it in-sim.
Yeah, a little bit easier. We've also always ran kind of 4-lap qualifying for quite some time in terms of the official Indy 500, but as you say, in terms of hosted, it's been a little bit more difficult to do and has required people to sort of track the average manually. But yeah, it sounds kind of simple that you have to get 4 clean laps in, but as we mentioned, it's really, really difficult to just hold on to the car, especially in the latter laps. You're definitely going to be working the weight jacket to try and make sure you're not getting too loose. The other thing is you're obviously going to make sure that you want to track out to the wall on exit to scrub as minimal speed as possible, just in the same way as that you kind of want to get as close to the curb as possible. But if you even tag the wall a little bit and pick up a 0x, it will invalidate your whole run. So you do have to be careful. It's not easy. It really is not easy to qualify at Indy, and I expect that we're going to see some drivers who are going to have mistakes on their runs and who are not actually going to complete the 4-lap average.
Now, a couple of the drivers I'm keeping an eye on here, Chad, includes this one. Riley Thompson, we're on board with right now in the 58 machine. He's one of the potential favorites because he's been very quick here in the past at the Brickyard, tracking his way up to the wall, carrying more than 230 miles an hour now down the middle of the back straightaway.
Yeah, it's incredible to watch. Watch how down the left side tires get close to that little curbing that's on the inside there. If you touch that, it's going to be very upsetting to the car and could complete your run. You know, if you catch the grass just after it, or you track up into the wall on exit as well. But yeah, having to fight the car on exit, washing out towards the wall, just incredible to see the skill of these drivers as they work their way around at over 220 miles an hour.
Bad news for Richie Hearn fans, by the way. He has had an incident coming out of turn 4 at the end of his first lap, meaning he'll have to start at the back of the field for this race. Richie Hearn, of course, a winner back in IRL days during the IRL kart split. As drivers now continue to circulate their laps, also keeping my eye on Christian on one Henry Bennett here for today. And the reason being, it could be a potential preview for the Open Indy 500 for him and his organization in the 007 for today.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, Henry is very, very experienced when it comes to the IndyCar side of things on iRacing, and he's definitely going to be one to watch today. We have a couple of those guys also racing in the Americas region later on, such as Liam Quinn. It's quite an interesting event that it brings out a lot of the kind of the IndyCar specialists, as I like to call them when I had to race against them a lot. But it's really fun, and it's one of the good things about the majors where you can jump into a race. You don't actually have to do a full season, but it makes it fun for the full season competitors to kind of go against the guys who are kind of just coming in to do their one-offs and whatnot. I know Henry's obviously a full season competitor, but this is a race I expect him to be very strong at, and there he goes to the top of the board.
At 39.294 average, Claude Belval second at the moment, Bob Beltrami, Lachky, Cologne now your top 5 at the moment as a majority of the drivers finish up their 4-lap averages at the moment. Several of the air drivers yet to set averages to keep an eye on include Dallas Pataska, who's on his 2nd lap, as well as several more that are on their 3rd and 4th laps at the moment around the racetrack. Of note, Ryan Mayer is also just coming out for his lap right now. And you mentioned the track temp picking up, Chad. The track conditions went from 101 degrees Fahrenheit at the start of the slapping session, immediately up to 109 within the span of a few minutes.
Yeah, and that just shows how getting out early sometimes has its benefits, sometimes has its drawbacks. With track temperature going up, the track is going to lose grip. And I mean, that can be huge and very impactful to one's lap. Dallas Pataska right now, as we talked about him running laps, first lap was a 39.4, so definitely doesn't have that pace that we saw some of the guys up at the front of the grid have. He's going to have to do a lot of work in the race, or have at least very little drop off over the next couple laps of his. As we take a look here at Colin Marzo, currently working his way on, I believe that's his third lap that he's working now.
Yes, indeed it is. It was a 39.6 last time by for him. His quickest time was a 41.3 in practice in race trim. 39.5, the quickest of his overall laps. Trevor Bobrovsky also trying to set his fourth and final lap. Set a 39.5 last time by. He's been fairly quick on his laps, where the average will be 10th place. 39.389 will be his average for qualifying. Now the eyes all turn to Dallas Pataska. Where will his average turn out? Back of the field. How about the mid-pack for Dallas Pataska?
That is definitely having an impact. The track temperature is on these guys. Dallas Pataska's average was a 39.6 compared to Henry Bennett, who went out very early in the session, currently sits on pole. His first lap was a 39.294, and his final was a 39.5. So all four of Henry's laps were faster than Dallas's, and it's just incredible to see the speed and how much track temperature does impact things as the session goes on.
Colin Martzoff has completed his lap at the bottom of the board. David H. Baker is one of the final drivers who has several laps to complete. Ryan Mayer also has several laps to complete. Richie Hearn currently on track to be the only driver unable to complete a lap. And Christian, your thoughts on how this qualifying session has turned out here? As expected, Bennett at the top of the board.
Yeah, not too surprised to see Henry Bennett at the top of the field, but as has been mentioned, obviously the weather has played quite a significant role here. I did think at the beginning of qualifying when we were saying it's 102 Fahrenheit track temperature, that's quite actually favorable for these cars, and actually probably a little bit under what everybody would have been set up for, but a near 10 Fahrenheit gain over the session is really impactful for lap times, especially when we're talking averages. And obviously the gaps are very, very small when you think about it. You can look all the way down to, say, 20th spot, and it's within a tenth and a half of the pole, so it's very close. A 10 Fahrenheit swing will definitely impact that quite a lot, and obviously the drivers who've gone towards the end of the session have kind of suffered for that.
Your thoughts, Chad?
David Baker, right now, we see him working his way through turn 4 for the final time during his qualifying session. First lap, 39.3, then a 39.4, 39.56 lap number 3. We'll have to see where lap number 4 comes in, but as long as it's not too bad, he should qualify at least midway through the pack.
And he does into the 10th position, bumping Trevor Bobrovsky out of the top 10 with a 39.385 average or so in the qualifying session. Now, as mentioned, Ryan Mayer is now on his 4th lap. Also should be worth noting, Thomas Geisler did not have his 4th lap count. That will mean the 17 machine will also have to start at the back. Where will Mayer start? It's the last driver to be able to record a time. About to find out for the Bombshell Racing team. Many other drivers up inside the top 10 of the point standings this season. The Bombshell Motorsports Incorporated machine, this time by 231 at the stripe in terms of speed. It's to the bottom of the board, though, for Mayer, 29th.
Out of the box, Mayer did not have the speed. His first lap was a 39.575, and it only slowed down from there. Just did not have the pace that his teammates had that went out earlier in the session.
So in the end, Henry Bennett sets the fastest overall average in qualifying, followed by Belval, Snyder, Partridge, Bobrovsky, the top 5 overall in session. In these times, artists are making political statements in everything they do. The GSRC Salute is the Scoop's social statement about sim racing commentary.
Home again in Indiana, and it seems that I can see like a horse for me. The new mown hay sends all its fragrance through the fields I used to roam. When I dream about the moonlight on the Wabash, how I long for my Indiana home.
Now, it's time to take a look at your starting grid for the 2021 edition of the Major Series Indianapolis 500-mile race from the virtual Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Henry Bennett will start on the pole today alongside Claude Belval. That average ends up being by nearly half a tenth more than Belval for Bennett on the pole. Snyders will start in third position alongside Ray Partridge in the 88 machine. Trevor Bobrovsky will start in fifth spot with Bob Beltrami carrying great speed in the Beltrami Salami machine. He'll start in front of Tim Matzke, who will start in seventh. Travis Henderson will start in 8th position with David H. Baker and David Walshke rounding out your top 10 starting positions, Chad.
Cordell Cologne starts out on row number 6 on the inside with Dawson Brock to his outside. Row 7 is Tim Claesons and Uldis Dukas on row number 7. Row 8 is Sam T. Harper and Riley Thompson. 17th is Eric Mickey and Dallas Pataska. Then Joshua Wolf and Ashley Beard wrapping up row number 10.
Just missing out on the top 20. Brian Barney lines up 21st with David Malnaritz alongside him. Pete Harrod all the way back in 23rd with Eto Santos Galindo alongside him at 24th. Ross Banfield, another driver we've seen be pretty strong over the course of this year. He's back there in 25th with Kurt Crum, another championship contender in 26th. All these guys starting towards the back today. Colin Motzoff and Tom Dreiling line up in 27th to 28th with Ryan Mayer and Neil Middleton lining up in 29th and 30th.
Rob Gott will start in 31st position in car 31. Darwin Mites in 32nd. George Gruber starts in 33rd spot. The last driver to set a time was Magic Sakowicz in the 34th position. Thomas Geisler will start 35th. Richie Hearn will round out the 36 cars who made it to the starting grid for today's action. Let's take one more look at your track conditions for today. Partly cloudy skies, 72 degrees Fahrenheit, 108 degrees is your track temperature. Partly cloudy skies, wind currently gusting at 2 miles an hour to the north. Minimal factor potentially for today with the humidity at 48%. In-sim day is May 29th, 2021. In-sim time just before 1 p.m. Now, a couple drivers will be followed along with today. Moinowicz was one of those drivers from the 22nd position. He'll be trying to charge his way through the field. So have viewpoints from Isaac Snyder later on throughout the race today. Snyder in third position. See on board with Snyder. Very dialed in and focused here, Christian. Your keys to victory.
Maintaining track position, getting the strategy right, and just being there at the end. You definitely have to be inside the top 5 with 10 to 15 to go if you want to win this. Obviously, if you're in the lead, you've got the best chance of anybody.
All dialed in and ready to go. Barney the flagman all set to go down to the start and finish line. Bennett and Belval on the front row for the 2021 edition of the Indianapolis 500-mile race for the Major Series. The green flag is out. We're underway from the Brickyard.
2 by 2 all the way back. Getting a good jump is Henry Bennett into turn number 1. We'll have to see how things go further back in the pack because that's where the issues really start to come in.
Oh, and one driver already loose. They're starting to crash in turn 2. It's Isaac Snyder. Beltrami collected. No caution. Now the caution waves as several more spin in the back of the field. Henry Bennett got a great jump over Belval as several drivers went around to bring us under yellow to start things out. Tom Dreiling among the drivers also collected significant damage as well for Darwin Mites and Dawson Brock. The first incident ends up being Isaac Snyder and company at the front of the field. Significant damage to the 13.
Yeah, and taking a look back at this, it looked like just going into turn number 1, Isaac Snyder tried to keep it down a little bit too much. The back end started to step out. He saves it, but continued to wash up the track and collected a couple other cars behind him.
See on the GSRC replay what happened here as that squirreliness right in front of Ray Partridge collects Beltrami, and then the caution triggers right on behind him as a second incident involving Drailing and several more ended up happening in the mid-pack.
You see there, he just got a little bit loose, and you have to check up, and obviously everybody's stacked so tight on the initial race start. It's just really nowhere in the pack to go. Everybody's bunched really, really tight, and unfortunately a big secondary incident there.
That's a third incident going out of turn 2, by the way, as we go back live and follow along with the drivers up towards the front as they're trying to bunch up already. Not the way some drivers wanted this race to start, to say the very least. But Sakowicz is at the very least one of the main benefactors of that, possibly. No, he's actually lost his front wing and his front right tire. But it's Bennett who is in the race lead. Belval, Matsky, Baker, Cologne now the top 5.
Yeah, and that's one of the things about this track is that just keeping things clean early on, especially if you're further back in the pack. One thing that I've learned just from watching race after race here this week is where the wrecks are going to happen and what the cars are going to do. If you come outside, if you hit the wall, exiting turn number 1, it's likely to shoot you all the way back across the track to the inside. Meanwhile, if you're earlier or early in turn number 1, or if you're later in turns 2 or 4, it's actually going to want to keep you to the outside with the way that the walls deflect the car. So just knowing where the wrecks happen and what the cars are going to do when they react with either the air or other cars around them is very key to keeping your car clean and out of danger.
And keep in mind that aero wash is going to be a major talking point, Christian, because especially once the tires start to wear out, it's very difficult to track right behind other drivers.
Yeah, so towards the beginning of a run, you're quite likely to see passes, obviously because everybody's tires are pretty fresh, and you can kind of really go for it. But a sign of a really good car, Indianapolis, is somebody who can pass late on in the run, because that's obviously a situation where you don't have the best tires. They're pretty much gone, so to speak, and it's kind of slippery towards the end of the run. But if you can pass at that point, you're able to kind of break through that aero bubble of the car ahead of you. Then you obviously have something really, really good underneath you, because not many people can do that. So that's something I'm going to be watching out for, to see, especially the guys who started kind of towards the back, the ones who weren't involved in that incident. So drivers such as Dallas Pataska's actually up inside the top 10 now, so maybe not so far towards the back, but still just throughout that midfield, just seeing if anybody can move forwards, because if they can, then that's a sign that they've probably got a chance if they can get track position. But as you say, the aero push, obviously when you're behind one car is pretty bad, but then when you're behind a group of cars, it scales up, and it can be really bad if you're behind a pair that's going too wide through a corner, because there's no clean opening, so to speak. So you have to kind of be proactive in dealing with it. You can't drive off into the corner, realize that you've got an aero push, and then try to gather it up. It's basically too late by that point. So there's a lot of background knowledge, a lot of practice and whatnot that goes into this race in particular. But that's where the drivers who race the IndyCar a lot will definitely have a significant advantage there. They're kind of well understood in terms of the aero push and whatnot.
Indeed, here. Lots of preparation has been put in by many organizations as one driver will drive on by the rest of the pack. That's Dawson Brock, by the way, who is 1 lap down. Overall, it is a total of about 11 drivers who were involved in the incident. Sakowicz, Hearn, Partridge, Gruber, Gull, Drailing, Beltrami, Snyder, Henderson, Bobrovsky, Meitz, Brock. All those drivers getting damage repair, losing laps as a result of said tows, are Snyder, Henderson, Bobrovsky, Brock, and Meitz is still off the racetrack. But it's Henry Bennett still in command of the field. Try this again. See how drivers handled cold tires here. Similar start to the international split for pro competition. We'll see how things fare out early on in this one. Coming to the completion of 4 laps, this time by iRacing. Pace car drops off. Field in the hands of Henry Bennett. Green flag is out, off and away.
Huge jump for Bennett. He controls the start, can go when he wants, especially single file. It's not that hard to do. Right behind him, above all, under a lot of pressure from Timetsky.
We had a bit of a wreck actually towards the mid-pack. Brian Barney and a couple others getting into it on the initial restart.
Oh, and they're crashing again on the front stretch. Ray Partridge involved after one car, and David Malnerowicz, who got significant front wing damage and rear tire damage, swung across the racetrack. Let's take a look at the GSRC replay as that incident you're talking about, Christian, ended up collecting Partridge in the secondary portion of it, and Partridge may be done.
Yeah, there was a huge checkup midway through the field, and Malnerowicz just ran in, got some damage. It looks like his left rear, very slow, and it's just unfortunate to see.
See, this is... Take a look at this. You can see there's the damage already in process. He's already trying to move out of the way.
And it's very difficult to hold on to that. I was trying to get out of the way and it just snapped back to the right on him, but that all kind of started where there was that check-up in the mid-pack. It is difficult at Indianapolis. Obviously, you have the initial start where here on iRacing it's 2 wide, in real life it's 3 wide, but then after that restarts being single file, it means that the checkups, obviously in a big field, can be quite significant further back. It's just that whole sort of concertina effect where, you get one guy who slows down a little bit, the next guy behind him has to slow down a bit more, and eventually it reaches the point where somebody can't actually slow down enough. So really unfortunate. This is not what I was hoping to see. Obviously a lot of cars involved in big incidents within the first 6 laps of the race.
Now, Christian, I want to turn back to you because how do you feel this will impact the strategy? Because the fuel mileage is about 29 laps in the clean air, about 31 laps in the draft. How does this now impact the strategy and how you play things, especially since this is a race where typically you try and work it backwards, so to speak, in terms of count the laps?
Well, I think at this point it doesn't actually impact it that much. Obviously, aside from the drivers who we've seen involved in the incident, nobody has come down pit road yet. But I think if we're still getting cautions, if we have probably one more caution, then it starts to get to the point where drivers might be able to almost cut out a pit stop if they pit and take fuel. Overall, I think it's kind of too early to say, to be honest, but it's definitely going to be something that people are looking at. Obviously, if we're talking 30 laps on fuel, that means that six runs puts you at 180 laps with 20 to go, which is why I say if we start seeing cautions around 20, we might see drivers pit to try and cut out that kind of splash and dash at the end of the race.
One of the drivers who pit in that sequence, by the way, were several of the ones involved in the previous incidents, as well as Brian Barney also ducking down to the pit lane. Tom Geisler also ducked down. The rest of the drivers were involved in previous incidents. Sankowicz has also recovered to 19th position after significant damage from the lap 1 turn 2 incident. Well, we're coming up to 193 laps to go. Just 7 laps completed this time by. It's been an intriguing race so far, Chad, and it's been a big-time week so far for open-wheel racing across iRacing. Of course, the fixed setup Indy 500s for the official racing also coming to their completion this weekend.
Yeah, those have been really fun to watch. I was able to cheer on some teammates running that earlier this week, and it really helps, at least even if you're working on your own setups all the time and getting everything ready for that. The biggest thing that it helps some of these guys do is get those strategy calls down. You get to learn how the weight jacker works in these cars if you're not too familiar with it. You can work with the fuel map, see what the car can and can't do in traffic, and that's one of the things we haven't touched on. Maybe Christian, if you want to get into it a little more, is what the fuel maps are in these cars and how they work for guys trying to save fuel.
Yeah, obviously, as we talked about, strategy and trying to stretch out fuel is a big deal. There are a couple of, well, I say a couple of maps. There's actually quite a lot of maps in the car. There's obviously a full power kind of linear throttle map in the car. There's also a couple of different shapings towards the top end in terms of kind of non-linear S-shaped maps, but all in between, so to speak, are fuel safe maps. Now, I personally I've never really found a great deal of use in fuel maps in this race. The biggest thing is keeping a car on your nose, which sounds kind of counter to what I was saying in terms of aero push and whatnot, but it's big to have the draft helping you. You know, if you're towing everybody else along, you're using, well, you're probably going to have at least 1 lap less range than everybody else, maybe 2. Some guys who are doing aggressive saving, it might even be 3 and whatnot, but the best way I've found to save fuel is always just to really lift and coast into entries and whatnot, which is a little bit harder on an oval. You can still do it, especially if you got someone to kind of pull you along, but around here it's quite difficult to save fuel because obviously you are pretty close to wide open. Maybe not in a pack, but obviously solo you are wide open, so you can use the fuel maps. They will cost you some power. You tend to want to avoid using them that much, especially if you're in a close battle, because if you've obviously got less power, then you're running slower down the straightaway.
Down the front straightaway we now go as the green flag waves for Henry Bennett. His green machine off and away with a great launch by more than 4 car lengths over Claude Belval once more, as we're now on lap number 9. Timatsky trying to keep pressure up. Meanwhile, for second position, the rest of the field fairly spread out this time with a clean restart.
Oh, and just as we say that, caution comes out once again.
And it's trouble in the short chute in 1 and 2. It's Sakowicz who goes around. And this time, it's the Team Mad Machine trying to work the bottom of the racetrack, loops it around, and several more collide going through the short chute.
He'd be very aggressive on the initial run down to turn 1 there, goes to the inside, and just... It is difficult down by that white line. We're seeing a lot of drivers struggling with it, but it's not easy. The car can whip around on you really, really fast. There's one big difference between an Indy car and a stock car. The stock cars, when they get sideways, they're hard to save, but you know you've got a kind of a chance of saving them. When the Indy car gets away from you, it's really difficult to kind of enact any kind of save, and he actually did a really good job of not getting into the wall there. Obviously destroyed the set of tires, but we'll be happy to still be able to continue in the race. But when you get down by that curb, it de-wedges the car a lot, and that's why you see that over rotation, because the banking isn't quite the same as it is on the rest of the track.
By the way, there was a crash under yellow as well involving that 77 machine, the 777 rather, of Ross Banfield, since he had lost his rear wing and engine cover. In the checkup effect, it was Rob Gall and Dawson Brock who collided as they were watching that happen.
Yeah, take a look here on the replay. They're well past the instant at this point. There's one car in front of them with damage, but I'm not sure if there was just a lack of attention here or what the issue might have been.
Going to see Rob Gall. You're going to watch as you see how bad the damage is there, Christian. That's very hard to drive in the first place at full speed, let alone in pacing speed for Banfield. And as Gall checks up and watches the spin that in turn happens, he gets hit from behind.
Yeah, pretty big contact as well in there. Obviously, yeah, when you got no rear wing and broken rear suspension, it's pretty hard to drive the car, even at pace speed, because you don't have full control of what's going on in terms of all wheels on the car, and obviously you've got parts flapping around and whatnot. But yeah, that's pretty unfortunate there. I'm not sure if further back in the line people didn't realize there was a damaged car there or what, but obviously no real need to wreck up more cars, especially under caution.
Beltrami among the drivers coming down for damage repairs. Rob Gall, significant repairs needed. Several more topping off on gas, including Richie Hearn. There's already repairs done for Ross Banfield to fix his machine, and quickly. As well with the sequence, Middleton will get his wave. Chad?
Worst part, I think, about not having the Lucky Dog, which of course does mirror real life, but the worst part of not having the Lucky Dog is some of those guys that got caught out early in some of the more minor incidents don't have the chance to get their lap back as easily. They're going to really need the strategy cards to come into their favor to try to get something done in terms of getting their lap back and getting back onto the lead lap.
Yeah, this would put Middleton as the 28th car in the lead lap. Currently, Snyder, Henderson, Vibroski, Mines, Gall, Partridge, Manerwich, along with Brock are several laps down, or 1 lap down at this moment. We're up to 3 caution flags. Lap number 11 coming to this completion this time by. I'm on your biggest mover so far. Ryan Mayer's up 12. Geisler's up 16. Sakowicz is still up 13. We also have several drivers inside the top 15 who have gained more than 5 positions as we get ready for the restart this upcoming time by.
Yeah, watching back behind, further back in the back, it's interesting to see how some of these cars are very spread out and disorganized. I would think that, maybe putting the car in fuel map number 8, that's the fuel save mode for yellow flag conditions, and just trying to tuck behind the car in front, you're trying to save as much fuel any way that you possibly can. I know we just talked about trying to, save and kind of, try to work this race backwards like you would maybe a stock cars on a road course race, but I mean, just the way that these guys are kind of disorganized further back. In fact, that might lead to some more chaos on the next restart if they don't get things settled out. I know they have still about 3/4 of a lap to get there, but I mean, we've seen caution after caution. You would think that maybe they'd try to get things going in a more organized fashion this time by.
Or counter, Christian?
Yeah, it's actually something that I probably should have mentioned with the fuel maps. Obviously, as Chad said, when you go to fuel map 8, if you want to scroll all the way back to fuel map 1, you can't really do it very quickly. So it's not uncommon actually to see people get stuck in fuel map 8 and be trying to click down the maps to get back to 1 as the restart is happening, and that itself can cause some pretty big checkups. So you do kind of want to hold it in map 8 as long as possible, just to save as much fuel as possible under caution. But you have to obviously be back where you need to be at full power so you can actually pull away on the restart.
See drivers already getting ready to go. In 4th, down to 3rd, and down to 2nd goes to Klassen. So they're all ready to go to restart things once more. 188 laps to go in the 2021 edition of the Major Series Indianapolis 500-mile race. European Pro Split. Green flag is out once more. Bennett with an air great launch. Belvalville this time able to keep up much better this time.
It's great to see these guys still single file further back in the pack. No terribly aggressive moves so far. We'll have to see what happens though as we get further on, as they're too wide. Back with Brian Barney and Sakowicz.
And so Pete had to come down and serve a black flag under the green flag restart, so he's been shuffled and lost the pack in 28th position. It's going to be interesting how things fare out now for him, as up towards the front, Bennett still has a 3-car length advantage, but the blue car brigade is starting to shuffle a little bit. Baker's trying to break away, but Cologne along with Paterkulis are trying to fight.
There's some great battles all throughout the pack so far. These guys doing a great job keeping things nice and organized. I think they've kind of realized they need to settle down. It is a long, long race, and there's plenty of way to go for them to make the aggressive, dicey moves that they were making at the start.
You talk about drivers settling down. Riley Thompson is not. He's been pretty aggressive. He's making some moves happen. He just passed on the outside in 1 and 2, and now he's deep inside the top 10, moving up, I believe, in his 7th right there.
A lot of confidence there on the send to the bottom of the racetrack. And one of the talking points, Christian, when discussing things for the fixed side of things was they expected it to have, for the open side, turn 1 and turn 3's third groove to be very active to potentially overtake cars. Riley Thompson executing it well here. Gets the run, forces the car to check up below, and takes the spot away.
Yeah, topside pass at Indy is actually quite a bit more common, I think, than most people kind of new to it will expect. And the big reason for that is obviously if you can get to somebody's right rear, you can kind of narrow up their line. And it's risky because you're putting them in a bad situation, like you see actually there, he went to the bottom, not able to pull off the pass. But when you go to the top, you can really kind of make them have a tighter line and slow them up and check them up a lot. But the risk is you're putting a lot of confidence in that driver to not wash up the racetrack into you. So it actually sounds odd, but it can sometimes be easier to pull the pass on the top side. You see him trying to just run the overlap pretty much every corner at this point. But it's all just a big momentum deal, especially through the kind of the opposite ends of the racetrack. He's going to go to the bottom again, running down to 3. I think this time he might be able to pull this off.
Has the better pole this time at 226 miles an hour. Cologne was only going 219 on the entry. Gives him the space. as now Thompson is up inside the top 5.
Something to keep note of.
Oh, trouble! Bob Beltrami, he's up into the wall in turn 3. Caution is out. Monarowicz also involved as we're under yellow once more.
Pop over the radio, ask another driver wanted a question over the radio, and it looks like he just got turned going into the corner. Just unfortunate for Bob.
You'll see it coming up right here with contact. Will be in turn 3. Had just cleared on by that blue machine, and they were starting to dice a little bit more into the corner, Christian.
Yeah, and I have a feeling this is going to be what I was talking about with the car on the top side, trying to pinch the bottom one down. Yeah, exactly that. That's the risk of being the driver on the top side, and that's Bob's second big incident of the race, and under 20 laps into it, so I think he's actually going to be out at this point. We'll have to see.
Tough break there, but go ahead.
I was going to make a note. One thing to keep track of, the wind out of the north at 2 miles an hour, pretty fixed wind condition, it seems. But that's going to be aiding the drivers, pushing them down the front straightaway, and kind of hampering them in the back. It's going to impact turn-in just a little bit. And that's one of the things to note here at Indianapolis, is just the way that the wind can impact the cars, especially down the back. There's no grandstands there to kind of shield the cars, and definitely makes things very interesting as they work their way. The speed difference between turns 1 and 3, it might be a symmetrical track, but it doesn't drive that way.
So we're up to 4 caution flags so far in the first 17 or so laps of this event. And a few different drivers are trying to cut their way through the field. As talked about, Thompson's done that. Others are thinking about strategy. Sam Harper has elected to pit this time by from inside the top 15.
It's coming up to that lap 20 kind of point that I was talking about, where you could potentially cut a pit stop out essentially under green. You don't have to make that splash and dash. But the difficulty really is, do you want to give up the track position at this point? We've seen a lot of cautions so far, not many laps under green. I think honestly I'd be willing to kind of sacrifice the strategic advantage just to be out front, to make sure I was ahead of any incidents.
2 to go signal this time by, and so far Bennett, by the way, has led every lap in this race so far. It's going to be really intriguing if things get to a long green flag run though, Chad, because you have different tire cycles in terms of heat cycles, you have different fuel windows. It's all going to be interesting once things play out, with so many drivers topping off caution after caution here, and some of them will have that advantage potentially of up to 5 to 10 green flag laps.
Yeah, the tires with the heat cycle, it reminds me of a really good beer. You know, you can have it and kind of sip on it, and if it gets hot and then gets cold again and it gets hot, it's going to skunk the tire. It does not handle the changing track, the changing temperatures as you put more and more heat cycles into it. It does not always handle the same, trying to get it back up to temperature.
Speaking of stops, Richie Hearn has already taken 6 of them today. Yes, 6, Christian. He's come down every caution and came down every single time. He's had just about at 2 to go for this race so far. Of course, raced in kart rather from 1996 to 1999. He's also active from 2000 to 2005, 2007 in the IRL.
I mean, I can kind of, and this is coming down pit road again, I can sort of understand it from Richie's point of view, though. Obviously, he had that mistake that happened in his qualifying run, so he started at the back. So he has no track position to lose by just pitting over and over and over. But it's a bit of a long shot to kind of bank on it going green, especially obviously after how many cautions we've already had. But I mean, yeah, if you're in the back anyway, you might as well come down and top off, just on the off chance it does go green. And actually, the drivers who stuck a lap down, that's probably their play as well. Just because what they'll be wanting to do is stay out as long as possible under green and hope that a yellow comes out during the pit cycle when they're in a position when they're essentially back on the lead lap, with the leaders having pit and them having ran a little bit longer. So there's some consideration with that. Obviously, it can be a lucky track position gain, so to speak. But I would definitely think at kind of 19 into the 200, that you are probably at that point where you are looking at pitting on one of these yellows, even if you're towards the front of the field, just to make sure that you're not way off strategy compared with everybody else.
We'll see if the trend continues, or we'll see if we get a long green flag run to reset your top 10. It's Bennett, Belval, Matsky, then Baker, Thompson, Cologne, Puteklis, Klassens. Then you have Pataska, who has worked his way up to 9th. Lotchke is inside the top 10. iRacing pace car is off once more. Henry Bennett off and away this time for the green flag.
Belval this time did not get a great jump on the start, but holding the outside to make sure that Matsky cannot get by on the outside before the start-finish line as they dive into turn number 1 for the first time on this restart.
That's the Maniti Racing driver trying to figure things out in that third position, sliding up and losing a bit of time with the aero wash as the top drivers inside the top 9 were able to get a good jump. Some of the aero drivers already spread out by as much as 7 car lengths.
Something else to note with the aero wash and whatnot, and why we might be seeing a lot more passes on the top side, but why we might not see a topside pass for the lead, is obviously if everybody's in a line and everybody's in close proximity, if you're trapping someone down there, they're stuck following essentially the line leader. See Matsky actually goes to the bottom and kind of sees that happen a little bit right there. You see he had a really big run, but then it just stalled out, and part of that is because he's in Bennett's aero wash, and then the top line, who isn't in Henry's aero wash, actually has the advantage. So that's also a factor in why we see the top line be kind of the place to be, so to speak, in the mid-pack.
Belval doing a good job defending, as this is allowing Bennett to grow a bit of a distance of about 0.6 of a second now compared to this battle for second position. Raleigh Thompson has also joined it, saving a little bit of fuel now and letting these drivers scrap for now. Side by side once more as Matsky goes all the way down to the white line, forced to lift once more. Belval with a better run.
Something I've noticed the last couple times for Matsky making that move down to the inside. It doesn't seem like his car wants to handle very nicely down there. Last couple of times, both through 1 and through turn number 3 on the inside of Belval, but not able to keep the car down as it kind of washed up towards Belval. Had to refrain from making contact.
And you can see with Raleigh Thompson, not as quick coming off the corner exit right now, losing a ton of time off turn 4. But this has now become a 3-car battle for position. Matsky with the big boost of speed. Henry Bennett gave him some slipstream down the end of the straightaway.
And Bennett really lost a ton of time there down the front. Maybe had a moment coming out of 4 and lost all of his momentum. Looks like he might lose the lead coming down here towards turn number 3.
Will that be the case?
A big run to the
He's
inside.
going for it. And he's got it. Tim Matsky takes away the race lead from Henry Bennett. And Christian, do you think Henry Bennett's trying to maybe save fuel here, let someone else lead then?
I'm honestly not sure. Obviously, it looks like the last lap or two, he's kind of just lost a little bit of pace, but he's going back for the lead here. Something that we've seen at Indy in the past is this tendency to swap draft on, say, the entry to turn 3 and the entry to turn 1. So that can be a way for a pair of cars to sort of advance their position relative to everybody else. So that's sometimes why we don't see people fighting passes, especially if it's for the lead or if they're kind of in clean air as a 2-car group.
That's actually a great point, because for some, you can pull away by up to a second, Christian, with that call before it starts to even back out. Matsky, though, wants to try and get the run now on the outside of 3 and 4. Back to the swapping they go. Matsky will take the lead at the start and finish line. Lead as we approach 175 to go this upcoming time by. How will Bennett play it now for the swap back?
You see Bennett ducking in behind, but something with the swap draft, obviously it hurts the guys behind them if they're running too wide into the corner, because there's no clean air route to take. So that's kind of why I think we saw Riley ran up to the back of this group, but then has not really been able to do anything, because every time he's looked for a pass up ahead, there's been cars too wide, and when that happens, there's no clean air to take. So you're out of options, really. You kind of just got to wait until that battle dies down and then try and make a move when everybody's back single file.
Looking at
Track up, by the way, to 119 Fahrenheit right now. Just keeps on climbing as we get later and later in the day. Currently 125 virtual standard time here in Indianapolis. And I mean, incredible to see how it was about 102 at the start of qualifying, climbed to now up to 119.
Riley Thompson now with the chance to take away third position on the high side. Squeezes Belval and takes away the position. Thompson up 13 spots already in this race, and it's just coming to the end of lap 26.
Yeah, incredible to watch some of these guys work their way up through the field. You got Riley Thompson 16th down to 3rd. And other guys further back in the field, Ashley Beard from 20th to 12th, 18th to 9th for Pataska as well. A lot of guys doing a great job just slicing, dicing through traffic and keeping their nose clean.
Absolutely. Thompson, though, wants to slice and dice his way to the bottom. Thought about it to try and take away second from Bennett. Ended up backing off a ton there. And Christian, that's one of the main things you have to think about as a driver is how hard do you want to push? And it's very early on in this race to try and make some bold moves. We may see a move like that later on where they try it.
Well, as I've been saying pretty much the whole race long, the track position is really, really key, and obviously Riley has kind of made way right to the front in terms of the top 3 already. So he's in a really good spot. I think he could honestly just sit here until, say, 20-25 to go. You see Beltrami being passed there. It has actually been able to keep running despite those big incidents, but that's actually going to hurt Riley a little bit because he's going to have to fall in behind. He's going to deal with the aero wash of Beltrami's car. But in terms of where he is, he's where he needs to be already, even 28 laps into the race. So he could just sit here if he wants. Obviously, some drivers really do like lead laps. I kind of feel like maybe he's one of them. So that might explain why he's being a little bit more aggressive than maybe is necessary in terms of track position. But the other thing is you want to try and make moves early to know what works. And if it doesn't work on lap 29, it's not really a big deal. If it doesn't work on lap 189, well, you kind of wish that you would have known earlier, you know? So that might explain why he's trying to get the lead now, just to try and see if he can, and see what options are available to him. I think Henry Bennett is taking the other approach where he's happy, he's running in second, he doesn't really need to fight for the lead. He's going to have a shot at this at the end if he maintains where he's at.
Meanwhile, they're starting to shuffle a bit further back. A second pack has formed up more than 2 seconds behind your race leader. Cologne, Puteklis, and Baker have been swapping around a little bit. This is where Klassens is, as well as Pataska, Lotchke. Ashley Beard is also holding on to the back end of this pack. And some of them are trying to swap. Now some of them are going to be grouped together because Kirk Crum has had issues in turn 2 for the caution flag once more. So the number 7 machine goes around and brings us under yellow once more. And this is a mistake that drivers can make in turn 1 and 2. A lot is slamming the outside wall and sending them spinning to the inside here, Christian.
Yeah, 1 and 2 is kind of interesting. It always feels like the more dangerous corner to me. 3 and 4 is always kind of not easy, but you don't seem to run into the wall like that as much. Obviously, massive damage to both sides of the car for Kurt Crum. If he doesn't have a repair remaining, which I don't believe he does, then that might be the end of his race.
And by the way, Colin Marswell, the car right behind him in line, he collected that outside wall out of turn number 1 as well. His front right tire appears to be disconnected, so he's going to have to probably work his way down pit road as well.
Inside the window for first pit stops here, as you see Martzov here's okay. On the 84, we'll have to wait and see, though, if he ends up having to come down to get repairs. Yeah, he's actually a bit offline. You might be right there. Look at the steering.
Yeah, he just followed up. You're trying to just follow the car in front, try to use that draft as much as you can, and unfortunately, with no front downforce, just followed him right up into the wall, right behind right behind Crum in that contact.
An opportunity to come down the pit lane and see if he can do anything about that, as here we go, strategy now coming into play because Ashley Beard elects not to come down. The rest of the leaders do. Interesting decision from Beard, as Yes, there's been a lot of caution laps, but 31 laps total into the race. This is still going to be an interesting decision, Christian.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to have any more than about 15 laps of fuel here, which obviously is half a run, so it's not like he's critical on it or anything like that, but not at all surprised to see basically everybody else in the field, especially the guys who've been running inside the top 10, come down. Bennett taking over the de facto lead from that group of drivers that was at the front of the field there, was jumping ahead of Tim Matzke.
Sakowicz and Handsome Pete both stayed out as well. They had been drivers who were topping off several caution flag periods in a row. Cordell Cologne missed his pit box. Henry Bennett was the first to take service out of the lane. That was followed by Matzke, Thompson, Pateklis, and Klassens, along with Baker, the top 10 now off the lane. So now we see the strategy cards come into play. How big do you feel this strategy could be in terms of how it could work out for some of these drivers, especially on the older tires, Chad?
Tires are going to be interesting for sure. The first time that some of these guys have taken tires in this race. Matzke should, it looks like, inherit the lead back once again, if not Bennett. But I mean, just some of these guys up at the front of the field doing everything that they can to keep things pointed in the right direction. Some of these guys took very long pit stops, 48 seconds for Banfield, 59.5 for Marzl. Just some of these guys taking very long, very calculated damage repair on pit road, trying to get their car back to 100% any chance that they get.
Expecting the one to go signal this time by, and as expected, Cordell Cologne will peel down the pit lane, and look at that, Ray Partridge also ducking out with Rob Gall. Those drivers are several laps down, though, 2 laps respectively, electing to move out of the way of the race leaders, and that's something that is a part of this format for today. Like in the real world, lap cars can be mixed in with the lead lap cars in the restarts, except with 10 or less laps to go. If you're near the front of the line and do not feel drivers can stay up there, they've been told to please pit and shuffle before the getting shuffled to the back. So some of those drivers taking that opportunity to try and let the leaders fight, it appears here, Christian.
Yeah, and I think Ashley Beard staying out there actually kind of put a dent in the hopes of some of the drivers who were 1 lap down, who might have wanted to stay out there and just get their lap back. So obviously him staying out prevented that from happening for a lot of them, but it's going to be interesting to see how some of our drivers who just pit there fight their way back through. I think we shouldn't be expecting too long to see Pete Harrod, Henry Bennett, and Tim Matzke having a nice fight for the lead. I don't imagine that Henry and Tim are going to want to kind of sit behind these guys on older tires.
Bad news if you're a fan of Colin Martzoff. After he completed service, he crashed under caution. He has now had to come down to the pit lane to get damage repairs done once more on his machine. That was after having the damage from the previous situation before. But to how this line will be forming up, as Beard is the race leader. Then you have Bob Beltrami, who is in 34th, 3 laps down. Isaac Snyder, 27th, 1 lap down. Trevor Bobrovsky, 1 lap down. Then you have Sakowicz in 2nd spot. Hanson Pete in 3rd. Then you have Darwin Mites, his 30th position car on Airwich. And then you have Henry Bennett on behind them. So several lap cars are going to be in the mix of the battle for the race lead, as off and away they go. Green flag.
Clean start at the front. Bennett not getting the greatest jump, losing some time to the car in front. But Ashley Beard, this is the 34th lap on this tank, and I have to see him pitting within the next probably 7 or so laps, depending. I'm not sure how many of those were under caution.
And what a launch for Beard, already gone for the rest of the leaders by a second and a half. It's now 3 wide with the lap cars as the caution comes out. It's Brian Barney in the 55 who goes around to the back of the field. It was down in 1 and 2 where he went all the way down to the apron before shooting up the racetrack.
You see a little bit of a whoa. That's pretty impressive that nobody else got involved in that, and then he actually held onto the car right there. But yeah, there was a little bit of stacking up going on towards the rear of the field. It looked like a couple of drivers didn't get away, so a couple had to kind of duck out of the line and then try and give the positions back on the entry to 1. There is a rule about advancing your position before the start line, but I mean, yeah, that's a wild moment. Obviously, trying to drop down to the flat to kind of get out of the way, and instead of actually getting out of the way, nearly ended up well in the way. And good job by Richie Hearn to avoid that.
Indeed. Let's look up the caution flag as we're under yellow for the 6th time today. Take a quick break. You're watching the Global Sim Racing channel for the Major Series European region and its pro split for the 2021 edition of the Indy 500. Welcome back to GSRC's coverage of the Major Series in the European region for the Indy 500. What's been an intriguing one so far here from iRacing's virtual Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Justin Prince, Chad Irvine, Christian Challoner with you with Sean Ambrose in the director's seat for today. And what's been an intriguing one. Cameras provided by Dougie Beard as well. Coming to the restart, this time by 163 laps to go when we take the green flag. It's Ashley Beard who still leads, followed by Sakowicz and Handsome Pete on different strategies with several lap cars mixed in, followed by Henry Bennett, Tim Matsky, Ronnie Thompson, Udis Puteklis, Tim Klassens, Baker, Lotchke, rounding out your top 10. Very intriguing race so far, Christian. All set to go once more.
Yeah, obviously a lot of cautions, but now we just had a shuffle into the order, and It's going to be interesting to see some drivers who've kind of fallen back because of that, how easily they're going to move their way forwards. Obviously, Riley Thompson, we see him be pretty aggressive. I expect we'll see that to continue. And a couple other drivers further back, like Dallas Pataska, trying to move their way up.
Off and away we go. Green flag. Ashley Beard catches the field sleeping once more. And another great launch. Isaac Snyder in 27th position overall, second in line. And a group of lap cars. Then it's all the way back to the drivers for position up in the lead lap, second and third, who are already 1.3 seconds behind all this. This is on board with Snyder. He's trying to recover from that lap 1, turn 1 and 2 incident.
Yeah, just so very focused, locked in. You can see just how subtle the movements are in the hands in his wheel right there. And I mean, just all the focus in the world needed at this track. There's no margin for error.
Yeah, and he's kind of under the gun, so to speak, as well. Obviously, he's lost his free car, and now this is the only one he's got. He's got to kind of make no more mistakes for 160-odd laps, but he's also got to fight to get himself back on the lead lap if he wants a chance at actually contending in the race.
One car slow down the back straightaway, Richie Hearn. As this continues to go on, Snyder wants to try and get his lead lap. Hearn will pull off the racetrack out of the way of this battle for Snyder to get his lap back, and does. He is now at the tail end of the lead lap in front of the race leader. There's Richie Hearn as well, who's had that trouble, was in 26th position last time by at the stripe. Lost part of his front wing after sliding into the inside wall after spinning in turns 1 and 2. P2, meanwhile, still lined up. Their teammates working together right now. Not a lot of urgency quite yet to get up to the race leader, who is in a swarm of traffic.
Snyder just praying for a caution right now, and it looks like Henderson got around your leader as well. So both of them just praying for a caution, hoping something happens soon. We'll have to see if they get it, luck out, and can get back onto the back end of the lead lap.
Trouble in turn 3. Several drivers scattered around. Thomas Geisler, Joshua Wolf, Klompo Vol among the drivers, and the caution finally comes out. Several drivers stack up. We're under yellow.
They got that caution I was just talking about.
Started all the way up in the front of the line, just about where Joshua Wolf is taken 3 wide by Geisler, and they crash the inside. Then Christian, they swing back up the racetrack and collect several more cars.
Heavy incident right there, and obviously everybody trying to actually avoid it, creating a secondary incident. And that's one of the challenges of Indy, to be honest, is that if the wreck happens, especially towards a corner entry, everybody slides up and back onto the racetrack, and it's very hard to avoid. Obviously, the closing speed is massive, so you're just trying to pick your way through, and it's not easy to do it. Obviously, we've got a lot of drivers who are kind of shuffled in amongst the pack at the moment. We've got drivers who are trying to gain their lap back, and that's obviously worked out extremely well right here for Isaac Snyder and Travis Henderson.
Keep in mind that Sakowicz, who was one of the drivers who had a rough qualifying performance, ended up getting involved in the first caution flag incidents of the race, recovers now to second for now on strategy. It's been an incredible race for him as organization, with Hanson Pete also in the same boat today as now. Hanson Pete thought about coming in, does not. Ashley Beard has to come in for service. Made it 41 laps on the stint for Beard. A couple more drivers will also follow suit right on behind, it appears. Sam Harper among the drivers who will come in and top off this caution flag.
Yeah, a bunch of guys at the back end of the lead lap. Mayer, Gruber, Wolf, Mansfield, Snyder. A lot of the guys at the back end of the lead lap. Isaac Snyder made it 40 laps on that tank as well. And a great job just getting back onto the back end of the lead lap.
Here right over the radio too, Christian. They had 7 laps of fuel remaining. That's how many caution periods we've had so far, but if they got a long run, that lost them their chance. Instead, now 2 of them, the gamble pays off.
Yeah, and they have no choice but to make that gamble, to be honest. I mean, there's no lucky dog, so you're not going to get the lap back by any other means than going and racing for it. And obviously we had that that caution where the vast majority of the leaders came down and a couple of drivers stayed out, and that was a big chance for these guys who were just one lap down to get back onto the lead lap and back into the race. And to be able to do that within the first 50, obviously losing a lap in the first 50 isn't great, but to be able to get back on the lead lap that early on is actually a really big help, because now you can start kind of picking your way through the field and gaining some track position and whatnot. It's difficult to recover if you only get that lap back with, say, 30-40 laps to go, because you're at the tail end. It's just so difficult to move through the field. So that's possibly saved their race. So yeah, good gamble. It's paid off.
Borowski appears looking to try and gamble as well to stay on lead lap. In fact, will get the lead lap this time. Lights go out to make it 27 cars in the lead lap. As now, we like to take the time to remind you that this race is in support of Macmillan Cancer Support. At Macmillan, they won't rest and they won't settle for anything other than the best possible support for people with cancer. They do whatever it takes. For more information or to donate, go to macmillan.org.uk. And the charity on board today was one of the cars, in fact, Sam Harper driving with those colors on his 52 machine for today's race, back in 18th position. A lot of great work put in by the Major Series when it comes to charity, Christian.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of the really great things about the Major Series is that every round there's kind of nominated charities and whatnot. And one of the things I like the most actually is the qualifying format, where you get one run for free, and then if you want extra runs after that, you make a donation, and that's how you go through with that. And obviously that's good for everybody involved. You know, obviously you get a second attempt if you kind of made a mistake or you want to advance your position in midweek qualifying, and the charity gets a donation out of it. So it's a really cool idea. I would actually kind of like to see more larger leagues that kind of have a qualifying you're in type situation run that format, because I think it's a good deal for everybody involved.
Absolutely, it's a great deal for those involved. As now we get ready for another restart. We're approaching 50 laps into this race, approaching the quarter-way distance. So far, 7 caution flags. Now approaching 43 laps into the race completed. Bobby Sakowicz, who is now in control of the field, followed by Handsome Pete, Henry Bennett, Tim Matzke, Riley Thompson. Your top 5 this time. Team Mad, 1-2, and ready to launch as the pace car is off. Later launch this time. Green flag is out, off and away. A bit of a stack up and tire spin for some of the drivers.
Sakowicz and Herod both did not come in under that caution. They've got 14 lap older tires than the guys like Bennett, Matzke, and Thompson running 3 through 5 behind them.
Darwin Mites, keep in mind, needs to unlap himself now if he wants to be at the tail end of the lead lap, and he's going to try that with several drivers snaking around, including many of those blue cars. Mites back on the lead lap. Sakowicz will now have some dirty air fed towards him as Henry Bennett is already there.
Very clean work his way off forward. You can see the coordination between Bennett and Herod, the 2 teammates there. Doing a great job just kind of coordinating their launch, getting a great jump from the cars behind. They did let the lap car go by, but that was more of just them not fighting it and just getting settled in here on the restart.
Sakowicz currently distance half a second over his teammate who is in the midst of that fight. Handsome Pete trying to utilize the bottom. Henry Bennett trying to utilize that third line once more for the corners to try and get clean air. Peeking to the outside once more. Side by side for second. Bennett takes away that spot.
Very clean pass, setting it up all the way back on the exit of turn number 2. Gets the run down the backstretch and gets cleared coming out of turn number 3. A very clean, very great move there for Henry Bennett.
Now it's the matter for Matzke along with Thompson and Puteklis, who is also creeping on in to try and scrap their way on forward. Those are the next drivers next in line to try and battle. Thompson really seems to be struggling though, Christian, with the dirty air again. plowed up the racetrack. Puteklis now making the move in the kinetic racing machine.
Yeah, I was just watching Thompson, and he was offset to Tim Mansky through turn 1, but then it comes down to what I was talking about earlier, where you're trying to pick a line that has clean air, and he picked a line that he thought was going to be clear, and then halfway through the corner, it turned out that it wasn't, so his only option was to try and bail out of it, and obviously checked up a lot, lost the position, but that's part of the game, and it's interesting to me actually to see so many drivers defending the inside line, especially down on the run into corners, because there's actually not really been that much passing going on that way. Everybody's really actually trying to get to the outside and making passes, so a little bit surprised to see so much inside defense, especially when it's not really proven to be a viable passing opportunity so far.
Of course, it's in reference, by the way, to the game that is choosing what line you're going to run to avoid the aero wash in the dirty air. Thompson chooses up on the third line this time. Dirty air comes back into play for Puteklis once more. Up at the front, though, my goodness. Darwin Mites really wants to keep his line lap. That's going to cause a change for the lead as Henry Bennett's now to the point.
And I believe Sackowitz might have hit the wall, or he is very slow, and the car is wiggling all over through turns 1 and 2.
Yeah,
and I don't think he's going to be happy. Sorry, Christian.
No, I agree there. That was obviously a very, very aggressive squeeze, and it looks like he's picked up some damage from that. Obviously lost all of the track position as well, and yeah, I think that's probably a bit unnecessary, not even 50 laps into the race.
And that damage potentially could be huge if it ends up being the case, because side pod damage can really slow you down and cause you to spin around in the corners. Sackowitz has a problem. He's already lost several positions from it.
Down to 8th at the line and about to lose another spot here to David Baker, and dropping like a rock through the field. Unfortunate to see for somebody worked their way so hard to get up to the front of the field. From 34th starting spot, mind you.
Yeah, several drivers now continuing to try and make moves now on Sackowitz. Up at the front, meanwhile, Henry Bennett is your race leader now by half a second and wants to try and lap Darwin Mites to get the clean air and use that lap car possibly as a buffer car. Mites not giving up easily here, and you can't blame him because this is a chance for Mites to be on the lead lap.
Yeah, do what you can to hold your position is one thing. The move that we saw down the front stretch is maybe a little more questionable than just holding the inside line. But a great job and a great fight through turn 1 and 2, working their way down the back stretch now.
Yeah, and as the leader, it's kind of an interesting deal in terms of you want to keep people trapped a lap down. Obviously, they're not going to get the lucky dog, so the less people on the lead lap, the less people you got to race. So it's kind of in Bennett's interest. As you see somebody in the background, they look like they got into the wall with the right rear off of turn 4. They didn't spin around, so maybe they just got very, very close. But yeah, everybody's been really aggressive, especially only a quarter of the way into the race. Actually more aggressive than I think is probably necessary at this point.
Keep in mind, we're now at a quarter way through the race so far. Mites continues to defend hard at the bottom of the racetrack, and all this has allowed Tim Mansky to come right back into the mix of things. He is within 3 car lengths of Henry Bennett now. And it's going to be really interesting how this plays out once it becomes a 2-car battle for the race lead overall, though, as well, with how Mites is now playing the snake.
And as well, Pete Harrity restarted second behind his teammate, lost 2 positions of cars, and of course his teammate collected the wall, lost a ton of spots. But yeah, Harrity kind of just holding his own, trying to hold on to that 3rd spot and kind of just taking his time. He's got about 0.4 of a second out the back to protect us.
You could see right there, though, how difficult it is for him to follow when there's 2 cars side by side. It's just you just can't really do it because there's no clean air for you to take, so you just have to back off and sit behind and wait for everybody ahead to get single file, and then maybe try and build your own run. It's really just a lost cause to try and pass 2 cars that are side by side unless they're extremely slow. You see Bennett might finally got this done. Very tight entry turn 1 right there.
Oh, and Matsky has to check up hard as the dirty air is fed off to him. Lost him a ton of time as Mites now is 1 lap down once more in the 72. What a battle in sequence there as Matsky now wants to try and jump on by, and quickly, and just about does to the bottom. Nice and well executed as Riley Thompson, meanwhile, right behind him now, also wants to try and make a move. Couldn't make it work on the bottom. As now, Darwin Mines doesn't get the caution he was looking for, has to come into pit.
Lap, let's see, that was lap 35 of the run for Mites. And something that you were talking about, just trying to make it 3 wide, trying to pass 2 cars. Reminds me of back when IndyCar actually was doing their virtual stuff during the pandemic last year. Lando Norris trying to force it 3 wide, unfortunately collected Simon Pagenaud, and a whole lot of drama surrounding that one. So 3 wide moves can be made, but it is very, very difficult to do.
Yeah, the tempers have already flared a little bit with 3 wide moves from today. We've seen from some of the caution flags earlier, but for Thompson, wants that spot back possibly. No, elects to save a little bit this time, but for the race lead, Bennett loses the bottom. Matsky now goes to the bottom and charges his way to the point once more.
That's a move that, I'm kind of surprised to see. Christian, you kind of talked about it as well with where the moves are coming. Normally, we've seen guys make the move to the inside in 1 and 2, and let's take a look at the replay here. Just setting this up for the longest time. See him setting up in the slipstream all the way down the front stretch. He's just going to dive it to the inside just before the start-finish line and going to get that move done in turn number 1.
Nice and clean and no swap coming in from Tim Matsky. Of course, someone with a lot of road course racing experience. His organization 4th in 12 Hours of Sebring in the GTD class in 2021. Also performed well in the 12 Hours of Bathurst as an organization in official racing. For Top Split Racing, 16th overall for him and his organization. It's been around the sim since 2018-ish. And now leads in the majors Indianapolis 500-mile race, Christian.
Yeah, and actually it's interesting to see that the pass for the lead is happening on the bottom, and I think the reason that's more viable is just because you don't have a car ahead of you that's kind of feeding you the dirty air, as we see Pete Harrod actually coming down pit road. Riley Thompson up to 3rd now. Be interested to see if he's going to try and make a play for the lead, but not too surprised that our lead 3 are kind of the same guys they were towards the beginning of the race. They're definitely the 3 that sort of look the strongest at the moment.
This car down on the access road you see coming out of turn number 2. That is Sakowicz, who was your leader earlier in the race, was forced into the inside wall. He took his repairs and he's back out on track, but just now losing his lap.
Lost a ton of time overall as now up at the front. That feeds a bit of dirty air to Henry Bennett now, loses a bit of time. These drivers are scheduled to pit within the next 6 or so laps, give or take. Thompson now has a buffer car between him and Bennett, though, and Sakowicz chooses the high line and forced to check up now as Sakowicz loses a ton of time.
Yeah, Sakowicz still struggling with that car. Obviously, when he was out in the lead, he was running really quite well, but after he had that impact with the wall, I don't know if it actually is the damage from the wall. I would have suspected that when he pit there, he would have got that fixed, but still looks like he's struggling when he's having to be the following car.
In that type of race now, in this stage now. Sakowicz, unfortunate for him, and now at 25th as several more drivers now snake their way to the inside line. That's David H. Baker attempting to try and make a move. Couldn't do so as Dallas Pataska now tries to set things up as well. Not the top of race I think we expected, Christian, from Pataska, because last year he was very quick here.
Yeah, well, the thing with Pataska is he's not really, really aggressive. You see some spinning in the background. Not sure who that was, but a spin off of turn 2 looked like it was a solo car incident.
Ashley Beer brings out the caution flag for the 8th time today, just in time for the pit window, as it was the 14th place car in the 94. Went around in turn 2.
Yeah, just lost the back end. Take a look at it on the replay here. Coming through turn, you'll see the back end just start to slide out, keeps his foot in it, and unfortunately it goes around, does not collect the wall at all, but those tires are going to be very scuffed at this point.
Yeah, remember on a different strategy, had to top off on the last caution flag. And now, drivers will bunch up once more for stops. But now, this gets us to our next point of the race. You can break it down in 30, 60, 90, 120, 150, 180. If it goes green, we're at that lap 60 point now, Christian.
Yeah, exactly. So obviously, it's a little bit tricky, I would say, from this point, because you've got 140 to go. So you'd have to make 35 lap runs, and I don't think that you're actually going to be able to do that without making an aggressive amount of fuel save. So depending on when the caution ends is going to kind of determine whether that's viable or not. I would suspect a lot of drivers are hoping that there's now going to be another yellow within, say, the next 10 laps, just to actually make it a little bit easier for them.
And here they come. Just about everybody coming on down. Sakowicz will stay out for the wave, it appears. Has to be expected after his service just a couple laps ago. But now, everyone's going to equalize out on the strategies, including Sam Harper, Isaac Snyder, Travis Henderson, Ryan Mayer and company, who pit under the last caution flag period. But this is going to be also where execution is well made, because especially for drivers, you have to be able to stop in the box properly, as well as get good speed in and out of the pit lane, and if you don't do that, it's a struggle. Henry Bennett with a blistering pit stop, able to come up on top. Half a second quicker.
Yeah, one thing that we've not really seen much of, at least not at the front of this field, is any green flag pit stops. And green flag pit stops are actually pretty tricky at this racetrack. Just kind of getting it hooked down to the bottom off in turn 4. It's an IndyCar, so you've got obviously a lot of aero help and whatnot, but picking the point when you get onto the brakes to make this the pit road speed limit is quite tricky, and it's very easy to lock up and kind of turn yourself sideways as you get into the pit road. So you got to be careful of that. Then you've got to make sure that you get into the box without kind of doing the same thing. But then the exit is also quite tricky too. Exit in the box, you have to be careful not to spin up the rear tires. It's very easy to actually spin one of these things around just leaving the pit box. But right at the end of the kind of the speed limited zone, there is a really big bump that you have to crack the throttle as you go over. Otherwise, if you don't, as soon as you take the limiter off, you pretty much certainly will spin to the inside. So it's one of those ones which looks a lot easier than it is, but there's a lot of opportunity to gain time by executing it really well. And obviously there's a lot of big mistakes that can happen both on the entry and the exit. So I'm hopeful that we do see some more green flag pit stops, because it's to me it's kind of a big part of the race in terms of a skill challenge, and it's definitely a point where the better drivers can really use their bravery to their advantage, I would say.
Yeah, the trickiest part about pit exit under green especially here is you have to take the access road all the way through to the exit of turn 2. You can kind of slide up just a little bit in the short chute and try to maximize as much speed as you can, but trying to hold the car flat out on pit exit is very difficult to do.
Want to go signal this time buy-in as expected after pit stops. Only about last caution flag. It's Ashley Beard who is your race leader. Handsome Pete, who pit under green, is in second. Henry Bennett, Tim Matsky, Riley Thompson. The top 5 now. Buteklis, followed by Klassens, Motsky, Cologne, Pataska, the top 10. And lots of drivers going to be battling to get some laps back here, too, in the mix of things. Darwin Mites we've seen be very aggressive. Vrobrotsky's going to have an opportunity here once more. It's going to be eventful, and don't forget about Nerwich, who is still up in the race, 5 laps down in 35th.
Yeah, a lot of guys multiple laps down, just doing what they can to kind of maximize their points for the race and hold on for, you know, Indy 500, a lot of guys treat it as a one-off, especially here in the real world. But no, it's part of a bigger season. There's a bigger picture, and you know, something happens to some of the other guys. The only guy technically out of the race with terminal damage was Dawson Brock. Everybody else, though, still plenty of positions to be gained if something happens to all the competitors up in front of you.
All set to go once more. Pace car is off. Green flag is out. Back underway. Good launch from Beard. Beard once more has 3 cars between 94, 21 of Handsome Pete.
Yeah, single file throughout your top 10. One guy making a move, though, is Brian Barney. He's on the inside of Sam Harper further back, and they are battling hard through turns 1 and 2.
The back single file, meanwhile, as a bit side by side, starting to form up between Puteklis and Thompson as well. Up at the front, though, a lot of drivers want some laps back. Vrosky giving dirty air now to Ashley Beard. Arowich also trying to get on by. Darwin Mites able to jump on by the 69 machine.
You've seen Mites be extremely aggressive the last time he had this opportunity to get himself back on the lead lap. I expect we're going to see that again here. And it's really critical to obviously get back on the lead lap because, as you said, passing is not particularly easy, and just having those strategy options to be able to do something is really key, and you want to be back on the lead lap as early as possible so you've got as much of the race remaining to gain the track position.
Meanwhile, Hanson Pete under attack. Henry Bennett with the pass. Able to jump quickly to second. Oh, wow. Beard has jumped up into the clean air for now. Vrosky.
Oh, big wreck behind. Big wreck. Riley Thompson.
And it involves the race leaders, yes. Off of turn 4, and we're under caution as this changes the race. Pataska gets collected. Sintez Galindo also involved in the back of the field as several drivers stop.
Yeah, Molnarowitz just got up into the wall on exit, and just everybody piled in behind him. Unfortunate to see so many cars involved, but they were blocking almost the entire track. Let's take a look at the replay.
And not the best spot for that to happen. Collecting Matsky, collecting several more. Majority of your front runners and favorites involved in this one. Just nowhere for Thompson to go there, Christian.
Yeah, it's just one of those deals where just a slight mistake coming off of 4, and the wreck just cascades down the front stretch, and as soon as it gets past pit entry, the track obviously narrows up, and everybody's just kind of in that funnel. You see a lot of drivers involved in it. Matsky, Thompson, Dallas Pataska. The huge number of championship contenders were in that wreck.
Yeah, and the way that some of these spins synchronized at one point, there was maybe half of a car width that was not blocked by a car as they worked their way through this very narrow front stretch.
And that changed the complexion of this entire race too, chat, because, man, a couple of drivers getting their laps back, I believe, in that sequence. But wow. Just wow is the main reaction I have there for that sequence.
I mean, you're not wrong. Especially where that wreck happened in the field and the drivers that were involved. That was not the place I would have expected it to happen. Unfortunate to see, just kind of collecting the wall on exit, and that's going to scrub a lot of speed. Trying to dive to the inside to get out of the way, it looked like, but at the same time, the cars behind went low to avoid, and they all just piled in from there. Unfortunate to see, but for Ashley Beard, I think you're very thankful right now. 25 laps run on this fuel load for Ashley Beard. Guys all behind, 6 laps, 10 laps, basically 6 the entire way down. So Sakowitz maybe is going to be thankful here, come down pit road towards the tail end of the lead lap and get fresh tires and fuel after having to kind of scrub off tires on the restart. But overall, yeah, just wow is really the only single word you can use to describe this.
On board with Snyder, and remember, was able to scrap to get his lap back, remember. He's all the way back in 10th position, Christian. Wow is another reaction I can put to that, because wow, he's been able to recover very well from lap 1.
Yeah, I'm honestly surprised that he's got back up inside the top 10 as quickly as he has. Obviously, there was some significant contributions from the drivers that were just having a wreck off of 4, which has enabled that. But it kind of does come back to what I was saying in terms of if you can get the lap back early, you can get the track position back, and you can kind of get back in the race. So I imagine that's basically what everybody who was just in that wreck is now thinking of trying to do the same. But we're about a third of the way in now. I'm still honestly surprised at how aggressive the majority of the field is being. We've had a significant number of wrecks at this point, and I understand everybody's trying to get what they could get and get into position for the end, but we kind of do need to wind it back a little bit, otherwise we're not going to have any cars left by the end.
Yep. let's wind it back a little bit to where, remember, Beard spun out for a prior caution flag. In a prior caution flag, I should rather say. And is now your race leader. That's an intriguing part of this too, Chad, where the spin, even with the older tires now, still has Ashley Beard as your race leader.
Yeah, the off-fuel strategy is going to be something that plays out over time. 19 laps, the difference between his tires and Henry Bennett, the guy running P2 right now. Going to be fun to watch that. Bennett's been one of those cars up front all day. Started P1, currently running P2. Meanwhile, everybody behind him, the rest of the top 5, 2 guys started outside of the top 20, 2 started outside of the top 10, and I mean, it's just been a huge shuffle throughout the fields with guys moving both up and down, huge amounts of positions.
Your thoughts, Christian, on this?
I mean, I would honestly say that there's a lot of shuffling happening in the field right now, and just generally speaking, I think actually Ashley Beard's strategy of trying to stay out and just trying to be in the lead, even though it's putting him at a strategy disadvantage, is actually probably the safest thing you can do. Obviously, we've seen some of our kind of long-time leaders, such as Henry Bennett, trying to do the same thing, but a lot of the time when the leaders are coming down pit road, it's shuffling the guys who are 1 lap down, 2 lap down, and whatnot to the front of the line, and they're all trying to fight to get their laps back. And that's actually kind of where we're seeing a lot of the really aggressive fighting happen. Unfortunately, some of the wrecks as well.
Green flag coming out this time by Beard in control of the field. Vrosky and Mine still battling for laps back. We're back underway. And now a clean restart with a lot of separation. Bennett going to have to pass by 3 different cars if he wants to get his lead back. He's currently the net leader on his strategy. Handsome Pete only about a lap or so off cycle on that on green flag laps is right behind him. And as expected, lap cars looking to get their laps back already. Bobrovsky from 22nd position is now at the tail end of the lead lap.
Yeah, watching guys fight their way back onto the lead lap, especially when it seems like time and time again it's been Ashley Beard, the car at the front of the line, that needs to deal with these cars the most. Bennett, though, wow, what a move out into turn number 1, just swinging all the way to the outside line and hounding that car right in front of him, of Meitz.
You can already see Bennett is reeled in Meitz indeed. Bit of snaky now from your current line leader, being Bobrovsky, as Bennett chooses the high line, trying to build up momentum to get within now that 0.6 of a second gap of Beard to get to the point once more. He's been one of the dominant cars all day so far, and now wants to move to the bottom of Meitz. This is not for position, but it allows him to have no buffer between him and first place. Beard near contact in 1 and 2.
Really had to back out of that one, did Bennett, but able to keep momentum up and not lose any time to the car behind.
Yeah, that's probably not one that I'd be actually trying to fight. Obviously, we've seen Meitz has been very aggressive, and for Henry, there's not a lot to be gained here, so it might make more sense to just sit behind and kind of allow Darwin to sort of fight to get his lap back.
This has been intriguing how this has all played out for some of these competitors. By the way, some of the drivers involved in the incidents before. Matsky is all the way back in 29th, 1 lap down. Riley Thompson, 26, 1 lap down. Really changed the complexions of these front runners as Bennett still has not been able to get on by Meitz. As Meitz pushes up, this may allow him to get the opportunity to make the move.
Yeah, incredible run there, swinging out to the outside line for Bennett on entry, really setting up that move going into the corner and having a perfect run on exit as Meitz had to check up.
We'll see how he handles Ashley Beard coming up here. Now needs to close up under 4/10 to get up there. Beard wants to now get a buffer once more. Bobrovsky, that car, he now leapfrog with the swap draft.
Yeah, but Bobrovsky trying to hold on onto the top side here, obviously trying to maintain that position back on the lead lap, not wanting to give this up. it's going to make it actually difficult for Bennett to get close to him just because of the air, and obviously 2 cars side by side ahead. He's going to be able to close in, but it'll be hard to pick a line to make a run.
How frustrating is it, though, if you're the race leader and you know that, of course, these drivers are trying to get a lap back. It's losing time and getting loose. Beard hard into the wall with Mites. Caution is out as everyone tries to dodge.
Yeah, Mites just plowed into him right there. I mean, it was obviously hard to judge and everything, but it looked like he just never really made an attempt to go around him.
Take a look at the replay as was about to say there was this also big opportunity, and wow.
It was very hard to predict what that car was going to do. It looked like it was spinning down to the inside, and unfortunately not able to keep it down, spun back towards the middle of the racetrack, and Mites thought that he was going to just be committed and keep it to the outside, but nope. The car was there, and unfortunate to see. Thankfully, though, it looks like only 2 cars involved.
Could have been much more bigger in terms of that incident, indeed. You can see how bad the car is hurt. That is very demolished. Our IR-18.
He's got to be careful, though. We've seen how difficult it is for these guys to drive these things when they're all busted up like that. We've seen some incidents under pacing trying to drive a car like that back, and obviously he's got back in line. He's going to be able to take his repair, and he'll be able to continue on with actually minimal loss, but got to get into pit road and into the pit box first.
Darren Mites is now out of the race as a result of that incident. Asher Beard and the bicycle able to make it into the pit lane. It looks like a couple drivers from the mid-pack will follow suit. Sam Harper, David Baker, among the drivers coming in, along with Joshua Wolf, Tom Drayling for strategy. That is caution number, if my count is right, 10-ish so far in this race. Puts Bennett to the point. Now, have to talk about this as well. When it comes to the iRacing IndyCar community, it is one of the most tightly knit communities in all of iRacing, chat, because many different drivers compete in the circuit and know each other and learn from one another. It is very closely knit, and it can be seen the same when it comes to the fans who watch these types of races. With the major series, it ends up drawing as many of the iRacing community members of IndyCar's community as possible, chat.
Oh, absolutely. We talked about yesterday. I was here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for the Grand Prix. Met up with about 5 or 6 members of one of the leagues that I compete in and broadcast for, and always fun to meet up with people you've known for years online. Great to see that, and just great to see communities come together. Kind of off topic from that, but I mean, I know Christian, I've known you for years just from other communities online as well, and getting together with you and commentating races and everything. It's great to bring people from all over the world and different walks of life together to put on a great show for everybody watching at home.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's kind of interesting how it sort of all works out, and how you kind of meet people in different communities, and in and outside of iRacing. So that's an interesting deal. Obviously, me and you met outside of iRacing before then. You ended up actually on the service as well. So that's kind of cool. As you say, obviously, IndyCar guys are really, really tight knit. I've kind of worked with Liam Quinn and his group of guys for the past, I don't know, 2-3 years, might even be longer than that now. And when I say work with them, I mean basically that's been a hand-holding exercise where they've told me what I need to do, and I've driven the car. So yeah, I would say there's maybe an outside perspective that it's kind of a bit of a closed group, but my perception of it actually kind of being on the little bit on the inside is that it's actually not really like that at all. That, like you say, everybody kind of talks to each other, and actually everybody's really quite welcoming, and it's surprising and impressive for a car as complicated as this one that is the case. Obviously, there's a lot of cars out there where guys kind of keep things really, really close to the chest and don't really want everybody sort of knowing what's going on and whatnot. There's still a little bit of that. Obviously, there's, especially with the Indy 500, everybody's trying to kind of have marginal gains and whatnot, but yeah, overall I've found it a really welcoming community, and had some really really good races in it.
What's the old adage? Teach a man to fish. He eats for a lifetime. You give a man a fish, he eats for a day. You can give somebody a setup and they're fine for a race, but I found more so with this community that they're more likely to teach you how to work on a setup and kind of tell you what different things do than it is to just give you their setup and say, here, go turn left.
We'll see how drivers do with their setups now for this restart coming up. 125 laps to go. This time by, it is Bennett, Handsome Pete, Puteklis, Klassens, Lotchke, Snyder, Mickey, followed by Henderson, Martzov, and Mayer, your top 10. Mayer started all the way back in 29th position. Martzov has recovered from various incidents, and now Bennett bringing his car very low down the racetrack for this restart.
And that is something you don't see very often. You typically want to protect the outside line so you can't get past before the line. And this time we're already seeing 2 wide moves towards the front of the pack and almost 3 wide there, it looked like.
Tim Klassens wanting to make a move and does for 3rd position. Interesting decision there, Christian, on terms of that. I haven't seen that too often for a restart here.
Yeah, I was actually thinking the same thing. Obviously, normally what you'll see is drivers will run right up against the fence to prevent people passing them on the right side, and they'll also kind of go a lot earlier than he did. It looked like he waited all the way until the green came out, so a big checkup in that lead group, but interestingly the rest of the field was really spread out.
These front 5 have broken away in incredible dives all through 3 wide going into turn number 1.
3 wide for the race lead with 124 to go, and Bennett able to make it stick to get the lead. Puteklis now to 2nd. Now to 3rd goes Handsome Pete, and Lotchke, who has been quietly running inside the top 10 much of this race, is right in the mix as well, able to jump by Klassens for 4th spot.
Top 5 had their own little break there off the get-go, but that 3 wide move and having everybody check up and have a little bit of give and take, let the rest of the field catch right back up to them. So now the gap between 5th and 6th is not more than a couple of car lengths.
Here comes Puteklis. You can see the speed differential massive. 6 miles an hour quicker to the inside. Puteklis to the race lead for the first time for the Kinetic Racing Machine. Impressive pass right there, allows Bennett to line up. We'll see how things play out as one car cuts to the inside. That's Isaac Snyder wanting to get to the top 5 as they're side by side for the lead again for the swap draft.
And everybody's staying really tight together right now, and it was interesting to watch Bennett when he was repassing Puteklis. He kind of really arced it in. He was trying to keep the clean air on his nose for as long as absolutely possible. By kind of running as much an opposite line to Puteklis as he could, and I think that's kind of one of those little bits of knowledge that these guys in the community know. And there's a wreck in the middle of 1 and 2. Pataska is in it, and I believe that will be the end of his race.
Caution is out for the 11th time today. It's Colin Martzov who ends up going around after a tap from the 50. Sends him to the outside wall and collects Pataska in his front nose. Let's take a look at the GSRC replay on this one.
Worst part about that move is that Cologne was a car that was a lap down and just fighting so hard to not lose as little track position as he could. Unfortunate to see, and absolutely nowhere for Pataska to go looking at his onboard.
Hard hit for the VRS Satellite Racing Machine, and Pataska, his 2nd major incident of the race, and continues the bad luck, it seems, on the ovals, Christian, for Pataska, because ovals are usually a specialty. The luck on them has not been there, though, this year.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the prior incident he was involved in, the one that kind of everybody was in on the front stretch, there was nothing you could do, and again there, just unfortunate positioning. But that's why track position is important in this race. You don't want to be in the mid pack. You don't want to be in the back of the pack. You want to be ahead of where all these incidents are happening, and that's why there's been some aggressive moves by Henry Bennett, but that's why I think his strategy of just trying to maintain the lead or at least be at the front is definitely the way to go about this. You want to get there as quickly as you can, just so that you've got the lowest probability of being involved in incidents. But yeah, obviously for Pataska, it's not really been a great season on ovals, I would have to say, and a lot of it is down to just unfortunate situations like that where the incident happens ahead of him and he's given nowhere to go and ends up involved in it.
It's one of those times we've seen time and time again here at Indianapolis, just racing the strategy, racing everything around you. Whether it's, in the real world, we have things like racing to a rain, racing to the rain, a red flag coming out for that, or maybe racing to just a fuel mileage number. The most notable recent one that comes to mind was Alexander Rossi in the 100th running, where he's out of fuel halfway down the backstretch on the last lap, and just some of these guys holding on for dear life. And that's one of those things where, especially for guys like Bennett, just trying to stay up front, out of trouble, and hope that the cards fall into your favor at the end of the race.
Been an intriguing addition to the major series Indianapolis 500-mile race. Let's talk about 11 caution flags now, approaching halfway in this race. What's been nearly 2 hours of racing action so far. Justin Prince, Chad Irvine, Christian Chowder with you. Sean Ambrose in the director's seat here of No. Brian Barney now out of the race. Joins a long list of competitors that are currently off the racing surface due to significant incidents. By the way, Dallas Pataska is able to get back going after 57 seconds of damage repair. But remember, Pataska is a lap down. Only 21 cars are on the lead lap at the moment. And Chad, when thinking back to the history of the Indianapolis 500 in the real world, have there been races like this you feel where you have a hard time getting a rhythm like this?
I haven't seen one with as many cautions early on and trying to find a rhythm as much as this. I've seen races, I can't remember the exact year. It's probably the mid to late 2010s. There was a race where there were, I would think, about 70 lead changes throughout the 200 laps. When you can't get that rhythm going, when nobody's, wanting to lead, or you just can swap draft and pass so easily, it definitely makes for a very interesting race, and all the strategy basically goes out the window in those scenarios.
Christian, as a driver, what's going through your mind here, knowing it's been tough to get a rhythm of a run going, but it's also one where you have to keep pushing forward because you never know if you get that long run after all. For those who watched along with fixed racing action yesterday, there was a long run all the way to the end of the race after it was similar to this to start off.
Yeah, and that's the difficulty. Obviously, you've got to hold on to track position. You know that there's wrecks happening and you know where they're happening, so you've got to hold on to the track position to try and minimize that chance. But you do have to keep an eye on the strategy because you are still in a race. You've got to make sure that you're not inadvertently ending up in a situation where you're basically going to end up making one extra pit stop than the competitors around you. So it makes it difficult because you have to sort of strategically pick which caution you're going to pit under and hope that the majority of the field goes with you so that you don't lose track position and whatnot. And obviously getting into a rhythm is basically impossible because there is no way to have a rhythm when you're having cautions so frequently. So it's difficult. All you can really do is try and learn as much as you can on the restarts, because if there's a late race restart, anything you find out here is going to be helpful. So trying different strategies in terms of which lane you pick, going down into turn one and whatnot is really all you can do.
iRacing pace car is off once more. 118 to go. Green flag is out. Nicholas and Bennett in sync this time for the restart. Hanson Pete loses a bit of time. Lotchke loses a ton of time. Klassen ends up behind by 4 car lengths. A good jump by the top 3 overall.
Yeah, and if getting single file and spread out a little bit like this does anything for the drivers, what it's going to do is let them settle in just a little bit more, get that clean air on the front of their cars, and not have to battle too far. But it looks like we're 3 wide further back in the pack.
Swapping ahead at the front is Henry Bennett, able to make the move on Protectless. Meanwhile, you can see some of those drivers that were shuffling around a little bit there. That's Thomas Geisler, who was down at the back of the field in 35th position to start things off. He's now up to 8th. And watch you along as a swap draft is starting to form up amongst your top 2.
Yeah, with that swap draft, getting as much timing, getting the timing down as close to perfect as you can. That way you can maximize the run between you and the car you're swap drafting with, as well as not allow the opportunity for the car behind to get involved in that draft as well. Because the second there's a third car trying to get involved there, it does not help the overall run for these cars.
It kind of narrows down the available options that you have with the swap draft. Obviously, you can't sort of give up a lane and whatnot if you know that another car is potentially going to sneak into that gap as well. But the interesting thing with swap drafting is if you're side-by-side on corner entry, it really disadvantages the third car, even though it advantages him down the straight. Obviously, down the straight, he gets a massive suck-up, but in the corner, he just has no free air to use. So it helps and hurts at the same time, but it's kind of too close now, really, for that swap drafting to work and to allow that front pair to make a breakaway, I think.
Yeah, you saw how late the move was there from Bennett going into turn number 3. Typically with the swap draft, you want to get that move done as early or as late as possible, but definitely get the benefit of it early on down the straightaway. That way you can kind of maximize that slingshot effect. Meanwhile, Pete Herod right behind, just hanging on, trying not to lose these front 2.
Don't forget about some of the air drivers starting to close in too. On top of that, you have Lotchke, who's closed in. You also have Isaac Snyder as the quickest car on the racetrack last time by. He's now making a move for the top 5. He's seen in the backdrop as the swap continues up front. Back with Snyder, as now he needs to close up a gap of about 4/10. Hassim dialed in and looking straight up at what's going on in front, as well as keeping an eye on what's going on with Tim Claessens.
Yeah, you see just a peek to the right there from him, but overall, I mean, he's had those eyes locked straight ahead. There's nowhere else you can really look, because the second you look over at something else or, get distracted. We've seen it a couple times in the real world where, or not in the real world, in, iRacing pro events where the smallest distraction from something around you, somebody talking to you, your cat jumping up on your lap, something like that. The smallest distractions, especially at a punishing track like this, can end your race and, kill your chances for a win.
He's kind of now in that difficult zone where you're obviously trying to close the gap to the guys ahead of you as well, but you've got to be careful, because you go from kind of being in free stream air where you've just got all the downforce in the world to being in that area where you're affected by the aero wash of the car ahead of you, and if you're not kind of cognizant that that's happening, that can really bite you really, really aggressively. And with the IndyCar, what you've got to be careful of is you got to try and not take too much when you're trying to catch someone in a situation like this. You got to close the gap slowly. You got to try and just get marginal amounts each lap and whatnot. You don't go barreling off in the corner trying to gain like 1/10, 2/10 or whatnot in one go. You got to close the gap slow. Otherwise, you could very easily put yourself in the wall.
See Handsome Pete waiting patiently in this scrap, electing to go to the bottom. Lotchke and Snyder is there. Snyder has joined this group to make it a 5-car lead pack, separated by 9/10 of a second. To get back to Snyder once more. What a drive it's been after being involved in trouble early on with the cold tires. Has been able to recover himself in this spot, the highest he's been since that first lap short shoot incident, where he got loose and was involved in the first caution flag of the day. Not able to make the move yet as they're starting to snake draft a little bit, trying to get the draft to Protectless, who's trying to swap still with Henry Bennett.
Yeah, you talk about the patience from Handsome Pete. And when you say he's gone from 23rd to 3rd, up 20 positions so far in the race, and we're not even halfway. That doesn't sound like patience, but that just shows how long this race is and how long this track is for these cars. Sure, laps are only about 41 seconds, but at the same time, you're fighting tooth and nail every single time.
Indeed. Let's head back up towards the front where that swapping continues. Protectless trying to build up the run once more. And Bennett again, these drivers work together in this series. And now you have to wonder if this is all coordinated to try and help each other save a little bit on the strategy. We talked about it could be a 1 to 2 lap difference, depending on how much draft you have and if you're in clean air full for fuel, Christian.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you can kind of work together as a pair to extend the run, say 1 lap for both of you, then it's definitely worth doing. And the other thing is you can maintain control of the race by having kind of an effective swap draft going on. You know, you can obviously run lines which prevents Pete Herod from getting a run and trying to split that group up. And you do have to really get it right, though, as we talked about. It's not something that can be done really without practice. And obviously right there was potentially an opportunity for Herod to slip into the gap. And right behind them, it's getting a pretty tight battle as well between David Luschke and Isaac Snyder. Isaac Snyder trying to go to the top side, not able to get it done off of turn 2, but he's got a big run now. It looks like people are starting to get wise to the idea of defending the top rather than the bottom of the racetrack.
Especially with the track conditions getting hotter and hotter. How about this? It's 119 Fahrenheit at the moment. It went up 2 degrees in 1 lap.
Yeah, cloud over just the smallest part of the racetrack can just cool the entire thing off, and it's incredible to see. It was back down to 111 about 20 laps ago. Oh, there's trouble!
It's Luschke who goes into the wall. No caution. We stay green as he moves his way to the access road. And a tough break is now the wrecking in turn 2. It's Tim Matzke, his teammate. Now the caution is out.
Because they had to bring out a caution. That's a lifesaver for some of these guys. Handsome Pete, that was his 37th lap on this fuel tank. Some of the other guys, Tekis, Bennett, and everybody, basically the top 10, they were running lap number 33 of their fuel load. So that was a struggle there from the get-go. But let's take a look back at the replay.
And you had the battle for the lead going on, but then this battle, Snyder tries to stick it on the inside and pushes up the racetrack, Christian.
Yeah, very lucky actually for Snyder himself to not be involved in that more heavily, but obviously unfortunate for David Luschke to just get clipped a little bit. I'm not really sure what happened in this secondary incident that we had with Tim Matzke, but obviously he's running the bottom of the racetrack. He sees the incident happening up ahead, tries to go underneath it. Oh, he's still underneath the white line as he gets into turn 2, and that's why he goes around.
Yeah, that transition looped him around, it appears. And one error driver, I believe, ended up getting in the wall there.
And I don't believe that spinning car hit anything, but you did see another car in the wall as well. But man, some of these guys just doing so great to avoid contact when they spin. And that's something very hard to do, but if you're going to do it, turn 2 is the place to do so, because there is not that grass down on the apron. Definitely easier for you to keep the car under control down there.
That was Claude Belval that ended up getting into that other car in that sequence. As now we're expecting potential pit stops, and this helps Handsome Pete. He was offset still by a couple laps. He's now going to be equalized on the strategy as everyone comes down from the lead lap.
Difficult to get to the end from here, though. 35 lap runs this would be.
Yeah, this is going to be very intriguing. I think Ashley Beard, Eric Mickey, and Sam Harper are among the drivers who have picked up on that. They are going to be on offset different strategies. They were at the back of the field. Now will be at the front. They've had quiet races outside of Beard so far. Off and away go several drivers from the other end of the lane. Now, service being completed for Henry Bennett. Off and away. But Butek was second.
The guys that stayed out were on about 20 lap fresher tires and 20 laps more of fuel as they got underway there. So have to see how that plays out. As you mentioned, you know, really it's going to be a struggle. You're going to have to fuel save if you want to make it from here, especially if we are seeing that about 34 to 35 laps on a fuel run. Cautions are going to have to be your friend.
Yeah, this is going to be really intriguing how this now breaks down, absolutely. And for Beard, Mickey, and Harper, they might be needing those caution flags. It's an offset of about 14 laps between Mickey and Harper. Beard, 21-ish laps now once more. And we've seen how well it worked out last time for Beard with all the traffic wanting to get a lap back.
Yeah, I was getting very excited to possibly see some green flag pit stops right there. Unfortunately, that was not the case. We were only about a lap or two from guys having to make those stops, it seemed like. So, going to be interesting to see as just the way that things have cycled out. It's going to be fun to watch these last 105 laps.
Definitely strategy is going to come into play for sure. I think some of these drivers who stayed out, they are offset to the guys who all just pit from the lead, but they're not offset in the sense of how many stops they need to make, because I don't think 35 is really viable. Obviously, the caution laps are kind of taking that off a little bit, but the guys who still have about 10 laps of green flag running, they can split the remainder of the race quite nicely into 30 lap runs. Somebody's just spun in the pit lane. I'm not sure who that was, but they had to tow the car back.
They had just been getting damage repairs done too to get the car fixed.
And it looks like Lasky just decided to retire the car. He's disconnected from the session. Unfortunate to see, but maybe just the damage repairs did not do as much as they had hoped. One thing that we've kind of talked about is the pace of this race. Historically, 11 Indy 500s, in the real world at least, have been run under 3 hours. 6 of those have been in the last decade. So definitely the speeds and the race have been cleaner and faster at Indy. Unfortunately, that might not seem to be the case, as we are not even halfway, and we're already at an hour and 51 minutes run here today.
Let's reset your top 10 on that note. Beard, Mickey, Harper stayed out this caution flag. They're 1, 2, 3. Then it's Bennett, Puteklis, Geisler, Herod, Snyder, Klassens, Henderson. Your top 10, Mayer, Sakowicz, Wolf, Banfield, Drailing, Bobrovsky. Then Gruber in 18th, Middleton in 19th position. 20th, Riley Thompson back in the lead lap. Then Sintez Galindo and Ray Partridge round out the drivers in the lead lap. Keep an eye on Dallas Pataska. He'll be up here with the race leaders trying to get a lap back from 23rd position in car 23. The iRacing pace car will come off this time by. Green flag waits up at the stand. Early launch for Beard. Off and away we go.
If you're Dallas Pataska back in the line, trying to make up as much time as you can, not getting the launch with those front 3 is really going to kill your chance of getting your lap back. We'll have to see, because he is a very talented driver here in the Major Series.
Keep in mind, Christian, it takes a lot of talent to be able to drive these machines, and it's been shown today with how these competitors have had this race play out.
Yeah, it's a very difficult car to drive, just generally speaking, in a racing situation, just because of all the aero effects that you have to deal with, and just its nature is it's a very snappy car. When it's stuck down, it's really stuck down, but it can get away from you very, very quickly, and obviously you have to be on top of that. When you're in a battle that can really come out as well, you can end up making little moves and whatnot, and they end up transpiring into massive changes in attitude. Huge grouping going down the front stretch right now. Tim Matsky's just passed about 8 cars on the front stretch.
Yeah, that's one of the drivers who is 1 lap down trying to make moves you're referring to. Had to come down to the pit lane for service. Couldn't stretch it out to try and be among the drivers battling for a lap back up the very front of the field. Would have been cycled behind Beard and Mickey. He elected to do so. But now, it's one of the quickest cars on the circuit at the moment. That's the tough break for some of these drivers, though, is it's going to take much of the race to get back up to the front, to be able to be in the chance, to be back on the main strategy and be back with the chance to battle for this race lead.
Speaking of how difficult it is, I just was watching Henry Bennett right there into turn 1, and he's obviously been one of the best cars all day, and even he nearly got caught out a little bit right there, had a little bit of a push and had to really check up, lost the chance to have a bit of a run on Pataska.
Yeah, Pataska's guy I've been focusing on basically since the restart. He's very aggressive, trying to keep his foot in it as much as he can, trying to build up as much of a run, trying to catch those leaders and get his lap back, but unfortunately he seems to be struggling to do so, losing the back end, but saving it on a couple of occasions.
And we talked about it a little bit, Christian, when it comes to the downforce levels these cars have. The saying that we talked about was you take as much downforce out as you can handle to be able to have
big
a
wreck
lot
behind.
of speed.
I'm not sure who it was, but someone's just gone hard into the wall coming off of turn 2 right there. No caution.
Isaac Snyder. It's Isaac Snyder from the 8th position. No caution, we stay green. It was Tim Claessens who hit him in the side pod coming off of turn 2. And now he's stopping potentially on the racetrack. This may trigger one if he doesn't get off the track. And wow.
Big impact for both cars right there. Just you could see Tim Claessens on the bottom, Isaac Snyder on the top, and they just got together on exit. Just Claessens just pushed up, and that's going to be the end of the day for Isaac Snyder. Obviously, massive damage to his car, had to tow it back. But that just goes to show you how difficult it is to race this car with the aero effects that it has and whatnot. It will surprise you, and you got to be really in the know to be able to race effectively around each other, to just know and have a good idea and be able to predict the aero effects.
You're now past halfway in this race. 99 laps to go this time by. Coming up to 98 now. It's Beard in the race lead. Mickey and Harper followed by Bennett, who has now been able to pass by Pataska since then. And followed by Puteklis and Geisler, your top 6 at the moment. Bennett already looking to try and get through these cars. Can't get the run quite yet.
A couple of guys on the lead lap to pay attention to right here. Riley Thompson and Cintes Galindo. Both of them running 38 laps, as well as Ray Partridge. 38 laps on this fuel stint. They're going to have to come in any lap now, and green flag pit stops, as we talked about, can be very dangerous in these cars.
Yes, indeed, as Thompson has come in to pit. That was from the top 12, having to come in for service for the 58. Meanwhile, the Snake is on up at the front. And the Snake nearly goes into the grass, in fact, for some of them.
Doing everything they can to break the draft of the cars behind. It's something that was talked about in the driver's briefing. That is something they're allowed to do as long as it does not cause an incident. And if it does cause an accident, then that is going to trigger some very stern words from the stewards. And we got some moves up here towards the front of the field.
It's Henry Bennett as well. The battle for the race lead is on side by side for a moment. Mickey trying to take a look to the high side. Bennett's now jumped his way up to 3rd spot. So look for the back end of Beard. Beard wants this lead. Now the run is coming in from Mickey. Here comes Bennett to take it 3 wide up the middle again for the race lead. Bennett from the middle line, able to charge his way to the point. Mickey backed out and lost a lot of momentum.
Bennett from 4th to 1st on that lap. A great job and a very smart move by Mickey as well. Just backing it out, knowing that there's still half of this race left to be run, and just deciding, you know what, it is not worth force the issue this early. I'm sure if this was lap 199, we would have definitely seen him keep his foot in it there.
And now Bennett, in terms of the strategy window, has a big buffer in terms of his cars on the same cycle by at least 1 second. One of those drivers to watch for now. It's going to be that side-by-side Harper and Mickey right in front of Puteklis and Geisler.
And the 2 cars I talked about, Partridge and Cintes Galindo, did both come into pit as well. So just about everybody that stayed out for the longest period of time there has now come in. But now Beard, Mickey, and Harper, the 3 that are running the longest tires and fuel on the track.
Mickey letting by the kinetic racing machine there that time by. And now, downside is here, Christian. Puteklis losing a lot of time here trying to pass these cars. It's going to be a tough sequence now to be able to get back up to Henry Bennett potentially for Puteklis after leading laps earlier, as Geisler also gets on by Eric Mickey.
Yeah, and this is the thing, in terms of having a relatively long green flag run at this point, it starts to string everybody out, and that's where the whole gaining in small increments really comes into play, where you've just got to be careful. You've got to slowly close the gap. Obviously, for Puteklis, he's seen Henry Bennett's got to the lead with pretty aggressive move, but a big move, to be honest. Obviously, that's massive now in terms of strategy and track position through to the end of the race. And we've still got a lot of fast cars who are trying to recover. And some of those drivers who've just had to come down onto pit road, they're now at a pretty significant disadvantage for the next 10 or so laps until the rest of the field has to come down, because that caution comes out, traps them a lap down.
And we're under yellow. I believe it was Tim Klassen's possibly. He is now off the racetrack, was running on the circuit before he left as a result of crashing and hitting the wall coming through the short chute in 1 and 2 and straight to the inside wall. Then a quick bump.
Yeah, and that was one of those things that I talked about in the pre-race. Depending on where you impact the walls in the corners is going to impact what happens to your car. Pushing out towards the wall there on exit turn number 1, just about every time I've seen it, it redirects you back across the racetrack. Meanwhile, in the corners, it's going to kind of just keep you to the outside pinned against the wall.
As we're past halfway, we'll take a step aside for a moment. You're watching the Global Sim Racing channel for the virtual Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Welcome back to the Global Sim Racing Channel's coverage of the Major Series European Region Pro Split for the Indianapolis 500-mile race. The 2021 edition so far has seen 13 caution flags, and several lead changes. Strategy has seen another lead change under the caution. It is Sekowicz who is back up to the point. That caution also helps several drivers who are offset on their fuel windows, including Sam Harper and Ashley Beard, who are now in the mix of things on equalized tires here, Christian.
Yeah, and I think that was interesting timing for that caution, because it now means that it's a pretty straightforward 3:30 lap runs to the end of the race for the majority of the field. Obviously, Sekowicz is offset, so he's offset by about half a run. So if it goes green, I don't think it will, but if it goes green, then he's going to have to make at least one more stop than everybody else, I think. And there's a couple of other drivers out there with the same situation. Tim Matzke's in the same situation. He's on 15 lap old tires. Rob Gall is on 10 lap old tires as well. So it's not just him, but it is obviously quite a gamble.
There are lap cars mixed up in the front, by the way. You have Ray Partridge, Sintez Galindo, Rob Gall, Bob Beltrami, currently the buffer between Bennett and Sekowicz. Green flag is out. Off and away, a slow launch by a couple of the drivers from the lap traffic. Other than that, nice and clean this time.
Yeah, Rob Gall really struggling to get going there. Lost a huge amount of time to Sintez Galindo that was in front of him, and even Henry Bennett behind him. The car running P2 right now. A huge gap both in front and behind.
And I was about to ask about this concern once more, because as similar to what's been seen, drivers want to get their lap back and immediately pass on by Sekowicz. In fact, he's losing some time compared to some of these other drivers.
Yeah, fortunately for him right now, he's got a huge gap to the next car behind him, which is Gall. So he can kind of just hit his marks and kind of try to do what he can to keep things clean for him. But the biggest part for Sekowicz right now is just trying not to lose any more positions and wait until that next caution comes out, because I don't necessarily disagree with the move of staying out here. The way that this race has gone, already seeing 13 cautions so far, with still 90 laps to go, we're going to get more cautions. We're going to get a bunch of fuel saving under them. So from here to the end, it's definitely going to be a fun one to watch the rest of the race.
Sekowicz still leads by 1.1 seconds or so, by the way. Henry Bennett no longer has any buffer cars between him and the race lead. Sam Harper also doing a phenomenal job as Ashley Beard hits the wall. Ashley Beard has hit the wall with the right side of his car. And looks to be okay for now. Let's take a look at the replay.
Just the slightest glance coming on exit of turn number 1, able to keep things going. Just very barely nicked. I don't see much in the steering that may have been impacted. If anything, it's going to be in the right rear. But keeping things rolling and pointed in the right direction without losing a ton of time, or I don't believe any positions either.
Yeah, it looked like he just about got away with that, and the caution is out, though.
That's caution 14, and it's Bob Beltrami who ends up going around this time from 29th position. Ends up collecting a couple of our drivers for caution 14 of the race, and it's two teammates, Isaac Snyder, Kurt Crum, he collected.
That's unfortunate for Bob. I mean, I think that's about the third caution he's been involved in so far on the day, and that just hurts to see. Just getting up and taking a look here at the replay, and just everybody piling in after he collected the wall.
Take a look at it one more time. This is from above, and you'll see Bob Beltrami loses it on the apex and collects two of the bombshell cars.
Yeah, and that kind of deal of just ducking under that white line at pretty much all corners of the racetrack is really catching people out, and you kind of want to do it because obviously you're shortening the line around the racetrack, and if you can hold the car down there, it's going to be faster laps and whatnot, but it de-wedges the car and obviously loops you around if you get it wrong or you're not prepared for it, and we've seen it quite a few times now.
That caution helps Ray Partridge and Sintez Galindo as well to get back on the lead lap as a result of the timing of the yellow flag. Henry Bennett will also be grouped back up with Sekowicz as well as Sam Harper, Ashley Beard as a result of this yellow flag. So with 85 to go, see how this now fares out. Overall, I have to start asking Chad, who has impressed you the most in this race so far?
I think it's going to have been Henry Bennett so far. He qualified on pole and just stayed up there the entire race. There's no point in time where his strategy has shuffled him to the back. He's never put himself in any dangerous positions. Just done a great job the entire time holding his way up at the front. I mean, otherwise, some of the guys, Sakowicz, if I remember, I mean, he's worked his way, not first of all, from 34th to 1st, but he was also involved in some contact earlier and somehow still worked his way up to the front as well. So some of these guys up at the front of the field, of course, you know, it's kind of the cop-out answer, but just the amount of times we've been calling some of these names time in and time out, just incredible to see the talent and the strategy calls that have kept these guys up at the front of the field.
Has anyone stood out to you outside of Bennett, Christian?
I would say a driver who's been kind of anonymous, but is having a really good run. Thomas Geisler. He's up from 35th without setting a qualifying time, right from the back row, and is up in the top 5. And we've not really said a lot about him, but he's not there on a strategy play or anything like that. He's there legitimately on pace. He's worked his way into that grouping. Yeah, I'm interested to see what he can do, because he's had a relatively quiet race so far, or as quiet as a race as anybody can have. And yeah, I think that's realistically the key to a good finish in this race. I don't know whether it's going to be a winning play. Obviously, we haven't seen him go up and fight for the lead at any point yet, but he's doing what he needs to do to have a chance, and he's been doing it without really kind of ruffling any feathers and kind of being in any sort of uncomfortable situations. And that's the one thing that we've seen with Henry Bennett, is that he's occasionally been in some positions that could have gone the wrong way for him, and it just looks like he's taking a little bit more risk.
Yeah, interesting development under this caution. Not too many of the guys, nobody at the top 10 has come into pit, but a bunch of the guys, Vavrovsky, Baker, Thompson, Matsky, Partridge, Gruber, Dreiling, all these guys have come into pit, so they're going to have 7 laps more of fuel. And I mean, every little bit counts here as we get towards the nitty-gritty. I like to think that we're going to see some decent green flag runs here, but it's only one of those things that time was going to have to tell, because we just don't know how this race is going to play out from here on out.
Absolutely. It's been an intriguing race so far, once more. So we now take the one-to-go signal. Sakowicz, your leader, Bennett, Harper, Beard, Geisler, Butekos, Handsome Pete, Mickey, Henderson, and Wolf. We're top 10 now. Gruber coming down an additional time this caution. We talked about a lot of pit stops from Richie Hearn before. How about 24 from Gruber so far?
I believe that might have to be a new record, and we might need to get a new Firestone truck out here at the Speedway.
I mean, that's a lot of tires.
Do we know that if he's taking tires on every stop? That's kind of ridiculous.
It is unlimited tire sets available for today's race, so there is an unlimited fountain of tires somewhere in the racetrack where you somehow find the tires and they somehow magically appear. And then boom, you just roll them down Gasoline Alley.
Yeah, just incredible to see how many tires Firestone can virtually make so quickly for these guys as they work their way through turns 3 and 4 coming to the green. But man, I mean, not only do we see a lot of pit stops, but also a lot of lead changes, a lot of hard battles towards the front of the field. And if I'm not mistaken, a lot of these guys at the front this time around are going to be on the lead lap, so nobody really battling Sakowicz and Bennett here at the front of the line.
See how the line forms up this time. One driver already peeking a lane and a half away from the wall for a split second there. Others giving some space now as they start to rev their engines for the restart. 83 to go. iRacing pace car off. Green flag is out.
Very good jump by Sakowicz. Bennett not letting him get too far ahead. Harper as well, getting about the same gap, about 4 car lengths between the first 4 cars each. And then right behind, the best battle right now is between Geisler and Beard.
Right now, they're separated out a little bit more, though, amongst them by about a car length and a half at the moment. But Bennett wants the lead, and quickly Bennett to the inside. Bennett making it look fairly easy to the point.
I think with no kind of fuel concerns really to make these sort of equalized runs out to the end of the race. It's probably now is the time for Henry Bennett to kind of cement his position as the race leader.
He's shown he's had a solid car all day long with the lead. Once again, we got a battle for third right now, and almost some contact there. Beard traveling way up the track and having to check up Geisler to the inside. What a great avoidance maneuver there from Geisler.
And it gains him a spot too. What a move, and here comes Proteculus now into the mix. He now tries to dive to the inside of the 666 once more. Can he make the line stick? A little bit on the bottom, no, as the caution flag waves once more. Cordell Cologne. And he ended up hitting somebody who went around in front of him. It was Ray Partridge who hit the wall, and Cologne got the worst of it. See on the GSRC replay, once again, that short shoot in turn 1 and 2 catches another.
Yep, just checking up. Going to the outside is just unfortunate to see. Man, some of these guys really seem to struggle with the track conditions. Back down on the track time, though, to 112 degrees as we're running under our 15th caution of the day.
Well, just as you say that, it goes up to 113, so it's going back and forth, these temperatures, and how hard does that make it to adjust to the racetrack, Christian, when the track seems to be holding a lot of heat and fluctuating a lot, especially since clouds keep on cycling over.
Well, I'd say a hot track with these guys tends to actually produce some better racing, but at the same time it makes it harder to just hold onto your own car, and I think that's contributing a little bit. That said, the track temperature is actually a little bit lower than I was probably expecting, so it's a little bit easier maybe, but at the same time it's still obviously quite hot, so it's going to be quite tricky, and especially towards the end of a run. I mean, we haven't seen that very often, but when we have, it is quite a challenge to keep it underneath you and whatnot, and that's the thing with the hot weather. I would say it kind of reduces that sort of margin of error that you have in the cold. If you get the placement a little bit wrong, you get quite a bit more tire grips to help you out and help you recover from the situation, whereas in the hot you're really much more up on the knife edge the whole time, and that's what makes it tricky. The thing that I would say is maybe a help for these guys, though, is I believe the way that this session is set up is actually with the kind of the predictive weather system, which allows some variation, but not a full variation. So the wind direction is quite constant, whereas the wind normally affects these cars quite a lot. And obviously, if the direction changes, one thing that you can do as a driver is you can actually look at the flags around the track, and you can kind of use those to know what's going to happen. But that's a big player with obviously a car as reliant on downforce as this one is, and you can definitely get caught out by a shift in wind direction.
Indeed. By the way, 13th on back elected to come down and pit that caution flag. Long pit stop services for Baker, Partridge, Cologne. 47 seconds for Baker, Partridge still. The box and just left it for 2 minutes and 2 seconds. Cologne, out to take the tow, has already had more than 3 minutes of service. Why don't we take the opportunity here to do a little bit of Indy 500 trivia, Chad, since it is the month of May, which means a lot of busy times here at the Brickyard, not just virtually, but in the real world.
Oh, absolutely. One little fun fact that I love to ask people about, the known drink of winners at Indianapolis is milk, right? Jules Gu won the second ever Indy 500. What was his drink of choice during the race to keep him hydrated?
I'm trying to think of a good answer here. Christian?
I mean, I was definitely going to say some kind of beer until he said keep him hydrated, and then that made me think about it, so I'm kind of a little bit out of lunch on this one as well.
We're going all the way back to 1912. Science isn't exactly what it is now. he drank 4 bottles of champagne on his way to victory lane.
How? How? How do you even drink 4 bottles of champagne whilst you're driving around the track?
Well, part of that, I believe, was done with a relief driver, of course, back in the early days where the race would take, I believe, 5 to 6 hours to complete. But yes, it was reported 4 bottles of champagne for him on his way to victory lane.
Wow. I didn't know that. I'm not sure how to react to that, but we're coming up to the green flag, so there's that. We'll do a bit more as this race progresses here for tonight. We're up to 78 laps to go when we get to the green flag this time by. It's the green car of Henry Bennett in control of the field. Sam Harper, spraying white machines in second. And Tom Skyslor in the light blue and orange machine is in third. Ashley Beard with his blue and white machine is in fourth. Tekwas with his blue machines in fifth. Hanson Pete is in sixth with the black, green, yellow, and red and blue machine. The pink machine of Mickey's in seventh. Henderson's blue cars in eighth. Mayer's pink cars in ninth. Bradley Thompson's red, black, and white machine rounds out the top 10. So a wide variety of colors up towards the front, but only one will come out from Barney the flagman here. The green. Green flag waits up at the stand. Off and away goes the green car.
And once again, a great jump from Bennett, but Harper behind, just under a ton of pressure from Geisler. And Christian, you were right about him just keeping his nose clean and for Geisler and just kind of being unnoticed, but at the same time, now we have to focus on 35th to 3rd up in the podium contention and trying to make that move for the 2nd spot.
Yeah, he's really kind of dialed it up the last couple of restarts, and as you say, moving up to 2nd right here. Harper gives it to him. Gonna be interesting to see if he can go out for the lead. I'm actually surprised he's making his move so early on, relatively speaking, but yeah, it's just done a great job to get himself into contention, kind of without us noticing, and is now starting to move his way up to actually contending for the race win.
He was the 2nd quickest in practice and preparation, had a very quick car, just didn't have the qualifying performance as he was one of 2 drivers, remember, who were not able to complete 4 clean laps, which meant no average, which meant starting shotgun on the field along with Richie Hearn. For comparison's sake, Richie Hearn is still back in 23rd position after that qualifying incident he had on the first lap of his run. But now, Geisler, running for the race lead, is right towards the back wing of Henry Bennett. Will he go for it? Yes, he will. To the inside for the race lead. Thomas Geisler leads for the first time.
That's an absolute clinic by Geisler, working his way through traffic, keeping the car clean. And I mean, I say relatively clean. You can see all the rubber and oil building up on the side pods of that car. But I mean, the attention to detail that iRacing puts into that is incredible to me. Having seen some of these winning cars up close and all the rubber that builds up on them. But no, doing a great job just keeping the car very clean, keeping himself out of trouble with all the accidents that have happened so far today. And he's got himself in the lead, and he's going to lead his first lap here of the Indy 500.
Yeah, it's interesting to me there that Geisler wasn't actually vulnerable to the swap draft from Henry Bennett after making that pass. So I don't know whether Bennett is trying to save some fuel. I think that's unlikely, to be honest, but it doesn't look like he's actually able to maintain pace with Geisler now.
It's a 0.2 of a second difference last time by. We'll see how Bennett plays this. Harper already lost about 0.6 to the top 2 or so. To that time, as now Bennett now has gotten within the draft to get back close once more. 74 to go this time by. 10 drivers having to likely take up to 3 stops to get to the end of the race, potentially in this race on the fuel. Now Bennett taking the second line that time, trying to diamond off the line, still can't close on in. And
Yeah,
this gets this, Chad, I was about to say, gets the strategic part of the race now.
Yeah, the entirety of the top 10 essentially has pitted 20 laps ago. And of course, some of these have been under caution. I expect them to go about 37 or so laps on this tank of fuel if things stay green. For guys like Geisler that are up at the front and kind of having to burn a little more fuel, it's going to be interesting to see when everybody decides to come down pit roads. We have some slicing and dicing further back in the pack.
On those drivers, Travis Henderson trying to slice and dice with Teclis at the moment. That's right behind where your leaders are. You can see some of them now in the backdrop, and no snake going on for the front runners this time compared to when Beard was leading. Beard, for comparison's sake, is in fourth, and that whole pack seems to be starting to compress Christian down just a little bit by each lap.
Yeah, and it definitely looks like the pace towards the front has actually picked up, and everybody's kind of just struggling to sort of maintain as we got an incident coming out of 4. It's a big one.
One car upside down, several more locking things up. No caution. We stay green.
Incredible. We stayed green from that.
It was Travis Henderson from 7th position who ran over the back end of the kinetic racing machine of Putekilis and destroyed his back wing. Let's take a look. We are still under green, keep in mind.
That's one way to do a pit entry, I suppose. Definitely not what he would have wanted. I mean, this is just an interesting crossover that happens right here. It looks like Putekilis has to really check up, and just Henderson just was kind of committed to trying to make a pass there. Big damage for both cars. Obviously, Henderson is probably out of the race after that one.
That reminds me of the incident we saw just a little bit ago that took out, I believe it wasn't the Dalpataska incident. I'm trying to remember who it was. A couple of cautions ago that really, basically the same thing, just catching the whole out of 4 and just get absolutely run over by the traffic behind you. Unfortunate to see, as you see there, that was just limping his way down to pit road right now.
Significant damage was running inside the top 5 for much of the second half of this race, and now take him out of contention with 70 laps to go. Geisler, Bennett, Harper, Beard, Hanson, Pete now the top 5, and Harper's trying to get very defensive here in this grouping. Tried a different line to take away the arrow from Beard, lost Beard some time.
And this group of 5 is now, after that incident, is kind of got a true breakaway going on. Tim Matsky's 3.3 seconds off the lead, whereas Pete Herod at the tail of this group is about a second off. So they've got 2.3 seconds back to the next grouping of cars. I imagine that Tim Matsky's going to be able to close that gap, but it might take him a while to do it. So if this stays green, this is a real opportunity for the guys in this front 5 to sort of cement their chances and to kind of get out from the rest of the field and make themselves kind of locked into that top 5, so to speak. And from what I can tell, that looks like what they're trying to do. Nobody really looks like they're trying to save anything right now. Everybody looks like they're just trying to get as much pace from the car as they can.
Up traffic aho, it's Bob Beltrami. Beltrami Salami lets everyone go on the inside line this time. Lose Harper a bit of time with the timing of where he reaches him, but outside of that, nice and clean sequence this time. Give a shout out to Tim Matsky. Remember, he was a lap down. Remember, was involved in trouble a few cautions ago. He's back up to 6th.
The consistency and the pace from Matsky as he leads this second train around the track. He's got that lap car now of Bob to deal with, but I mean, he's just leading this second line. Incredible run from started 23rd, was even further down after his incident you just mentioned, and for now, I mean, just a great start. Actually, he started 7th, sorry, but worked his way all the way back from a spot very far back in the field. Of a great run from Matsky and Mayer as well.
Keep in mind, especially for those competing in what's going to be a big week coming up for open setup racing, this is an opportunity for many teams to pick up important data, such as Bennett, such as Matsky, who have shown great speed, because qualifying is going to be razor tight. How qualifying went for the fixed side? How about 0.02 seconds separating 33 cars for that fixed side? Qualifying today wasn't as close, yes, Christian, for the major series, but it could be tight for some of these teams looking to try and make a run in official racing this week.
Yeah, for sure, this is an opportunity for those guys who are going to run the official, the open setup 500, because obviously they get to run a full-length race on their setups and they get an idea as to how they're going to run in traffic and whatnot. And there's not really many opportunities to do that. Obviously, you can get a feel for what's probably going to happen in the fixed races, but it's not the same as running your own car and whatnot and knowing what weaknesses that you have to work on for obviously the following week and whatnot. But as you say, obviously qualifying for the official 500 is always extremely tight. The guys who are really into the IndyCar, they spend literally months trying to put together setups and practicing for it. So it's not surprising to me that obviously even on fixed setup it's so close, but I imagine the open setup there's probably going to be more variance in terms of team to team, but I imagine it's still going to be very tightly contested.
Still tightly contested for the race lead a little bit here as they are reaching 27 laps that time by at the stripe on their fuel stints. So they will have to come in the next few laps to reach that magic number, lap 60 to go. That'll be 140 on the left-hand corner of your screens, where drivers will have to hit that mark if they want to try and make it to 30 laps to go. Chad.
I would expect everybody to have to make their stops at about 7 laps from now, running just based on how many cautions we have seen. That would put them at about lap 143-ish, give or take, maybe a little bit past that. But basically, you're not going to be able to make it on 2 stops. You can make it from 2 stops from here, but nobody, I don't think, is going to be able to stretch enough to save an entire pit stop from here to the end.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's why we're seeing the pace kind of wind up as well. Everybody's sort of locked onto the same strategy at this point. Everybody's probably going to try and run this stint as long as they can, just so they're for sure not marginal on the last stint. But anybody who makes it beyond lap 140 here, even the leader, is probably going to be safe to the end of the race.
Now, you can tell the top 3 continue to save along with one another. It's going to be intriguing, though, how the drivers who have been pushing will do. Remember Tim Matske? We talked about him in the 79. He's caught up to this lead group. He broke away from the second pack guys, and he is there. He is now attacking Handsome Pete for 5th.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a gap between 3rd and 4th, but still, these top 6 cars all fighting very hard between each other. And so much fun to watch these guys as the race winds down. It's great to see a decent green flag run here after so many cautions marred the early part of this race. Definitely great to see some slicing, dicing, and competition between some guys that we've seen week in and week out here in the Major Series show a very, very great amount of pace and fierce competition between them.
So Matske now is up to 5th position. Now we'll see how he handles 4th. And he's been one of the few drivers I've noticed, Christian, who has had match pace, if not quicker pace, than Henry Bennett when they've been able to break away.
Yeah, and it's interesting that Matske's been able to make his way through the pack relatively easily, I would say. Obviously, he was quite far back when that breakaway happened and closed the gap down, brought a couple others with him, and is now kind of picking them off one by one. And this is sort of what I was saying earlier on in the race, where if you can pass late into the run, then your car is very good indeed. And obviously Tim Matske is able to do that, so he's definitely one that is for sure in contention to win this race. One driver who's really impressing me just season-wide is definitely Sam Harper. He's had some extremely strong runs and in just a massive variety of cars, and to be running 3rd in amongst what is essentially car specialists at this point in the top 5 is really, really impressive.
It absolutely is, and he's been able to run well in multiple different disciplines, especially this season. Showed great pace last year, even on the dirt. When this organization came in, they made waves, and they've been making waves all season too still, Christian.
Yeah, absolutely, and I know they've got a tie-up with a couple other guys out here as well, so they've got great support in terms of when it comes to cars and whatnot, but you know, you still got to go out there and drive it yourself and whatnot, and Sam's doing a great job of that right now. He's trying to defend from Tim Matske. He's picked up that the high side is the place to go, but I think Tim's car is just so good at this point that he's going to be able to make a pass on the bottom. Surprised that Henry Bennett is not actually covering that off and trying to slow him down a little bit, made that pass pretty easily. But that's, you know, that's something you can play into other people's battles in a sense. You know, if you see guys 2x2 behind you, depending on which lane you decide to go with will determine who takes that position. So right there, if Henry wanted to, he could have probably ran the bottom and actually stalled out Tim's pass.
Now Matsky up to 3rd position, and keep in mind, we are at that mark. In 2, Matsky can push a little bit further too, Chad, because he topped off on the last caution flag.
Yeah, he's ran 27 laps compared to the 34 of the cars all around him. So basically, yeah, 7 laps fresher tires, or fresher, 7 laps more fuel in the tank for both Thompson as well as Banfield, Zach, with basically everybody from 9th on down. Matsky and Thompson both last pitted 28 laps ago, and they're fighting very hard. Something I want to bring up, we've talked about guys moving up and down through this field. Of the guys currently lapping in the top 15, looks like Geisler coming is just said he's over the radio. He's pitting this time by from the lead, actually, so we will see how that goes. Very aggressive on his entry, no tires locked up, and he is down to pit road speed.
A little bit slower, actually, at the commitment cone, and we talked about the art of coming in and out of this pit lane. We'll see how Geisler can cycle through in terms of this. I've seen drivers pick up 1 to 2 seconds as a result of their entries, Christian, and the undercut can be powerful here.
Yeah, and it really comes down to where you come out on track. If you kind of come out in that clean air, or if you come out in amongst only maybe 1 or 2 cars that you can use to sort of tow you along, then it can be a real advantage. But as you say, it looked a little bit conservative there coming down to the entry cone. That's kind of better earlier in the race, but now is probably the time where you want to be a little bit aggressive. Looks like the track position that he's come out in amongst, though, is quite good. There's a pass going on for the lead right now. Tim Matsky's managed to get it done on Henry Bennett, but the thing with Geisler pitting then and the rest of the field still staying out pretty much cements the idea that this is 2 stops from here. 1 stop now, obviously, remaining for Geisler.
Yeah, Geisler, one thing I want to note about his pit stop is he didn't set a time in qualifying. He started 35th. That means he has one of the closest pit boxes to pit entry. So I don't think he has the luxury of being very aggressive on his entry, just because he needs to get slowed down for his pit stall so quickly compared to some of the other guys further up pit lane. Typically, at least from my experience here, you want to be basically on the brakes very hard when you get to the basically the pit commitment cone line that they have there for when the NASCAR series run here. I mean, these guys just pushing very hard coming up on some slower traffic.
Henry Bennett getting very aggressive there, did not want to be stuck behind Bob Beltrami and forcing the issue on Tim Matsky, making him move across and give him space.
Sam Harper, Eric Menke, Brian Mayer have all come in. Bennett has indicated he's coming in this time by. Matsky try and follow even with the different strategy. No, he'll stay out of the racetrack. Bennett, aggressive on the entry. Reaches that commitment cone. Also a good send from Handsome Pete to the commitment cone. Gains a bit of time on his entry. So that cycles Matsky to the race lead. Thompson is second. Ross Banfield Company about 6 seconds on back. Keep in mind, you've seen that comparison now with Geisler, who has already come in for service a couple laps ago.
It looked like he'd come out there behind Sam Harper, if I get the cars right. So yeah, it did look like Geisler, his stop must have been quite slow, especially on that entry, to come out behind Harper, who was obviously ahead of beforehand.
Half a second difference in the box, maybe part of the difference. You see the difference now. Bennett and Geisler near identical in their timing, but where will Bennett cycle on the access road? It's going to be the big question. How about ahead of them by a decent margin? Bennett able to pick up a lot of time. Look at that stop as well, 9.6 seconds, so he's strategizing to knowing he only needs to get to about 30 to go.
Yeah, I imagine a little bit of a short fuel right there for him, and that's why his stop is about half a second faster. But that's really key, though, and that he's come out. He's not on his own. They are still sort of in his draft, but he's able to now run with a little bit of clean air. And if he can break away, it's going to be really hard to challenge him from this point.
Matsky has now come into the pit lane and sacrificed the race lead, giving Riley Thompson the point for the first time today. How will where he cycle is going to be the big question. Keep in mind he had a lighter car, or rather a difference on the fuel, I should say. Now it's the matter of will he go for the lighter car knowing he doesn't have to put in as much to get to 30 to go. And the answer, already off the jacks, already off and away, 9.6, about the same time as Henry Bennett in the box. Henry Bennett already making his way down the front, and this is going to be close. Matsky might actually cycle in front of him.
It looks like Matsky's going to have the advantage here. Bennett kind of checked up a little bit by these two blue cars ahead of him. It's going to hurt him coming down the backstretch, and it looks like Matsky's come out ahead of the grouping.
So Matsky now in the race lead as Henry Bennett is still about 1 second back. Net race lead, I should say, as Ross Banfield, Patrick Sakowicz, Sintez Galindo, Middleton, Wolf, Dryling, Bobrovsky, Baker are all drivers yet to pit. Riley Thompson has already completed his service, went for 10.1 seconds in the box.
Yeah, you see Riley Thompson there on the access road between 1 and 2. He's going to cycle out maybe just barely behind Henry Bennett here as you see them blend together off of turn number 2.
And if we can head towards that direction, Thompson now may enter the conversation again for the net lead because he is indeed right there in the midst of the traffic, all while Ross Banfield is running up at the very front of the field for the moment.
And here comes Ray Partridge, 1 lap down, but he's going to dive down to pit road.
50 laps to go, that time by at the stripe. Banfield continues to lead the parade. Here's Thompson now, we talked about, is now in the conversation. He needs to close up a little bit more, but he's right now only about 10 car lengths behind Bennett.
And I'm not too surprised to see this. Obviously, we know that Riley Thompson's very, very strong, especially with Indianapolis and the IR18. But I kind of feel like as the season has gone on for Riley, it's been a little bit unfulfilled promise. He's been very, very fast in some cars, but he's just not been able to actually get the job done. So here is an opportunity for him to fight for the lead of the race, and I definitely don't think he's going to want to give it up. And I know, as his teammate a couple of years ago actually for this race, I know how strong he is in this car around here.
Like trying to snake his way up to the draft of the battle for the net race lead that is reeled in Ray Partridge once more. Matsky and Bennett. Of note, Middleton, Baker, Sintez Galindo have all come in this time. Here is that net race lead. Partridge moving out of the way. Bennett. Will he try and go for the move? Yes, he will. To the inside as they pass by several cars down the lane. Bennett will make the pass into 1.
Just a textbook move. They're setting it up outside on the exit of 4, drafting all the way down and slingshotting up the inside, going into turn number 1. And now we have a couple guys pitting from the front. Your leader, Sakowicz and Wolf, both coming down pit lane.
And keep in mind, the net gap, if they were to need to cycle to the lead, is about approximately 32 seconds, Christian. They're only 23 seconds, so they'll likely cycle around where Ryan Mayer and company are. So around the back end of the top 10, some of these drivers at minimum.
Yeah, and this whole pit cycle has really kind of split up the top 5. Obviously, we had Thomas Geisler, Pete Herod, and Sam Harper, who were in amongst this group, who have now been split off. It's now become a 3-car fight for the lead. That other group of drivers is still in a 3-car battle themselves, but now have obviously been relegated to a little bit further behind. It's going to be really difficult for them to close this gap down.
Ollie Thompson closed in about 3/10 the back end of Matsky last time by. And now it is indeed that 3-car pack bunched together after being a 2-car pack plus one strangler just a couple laps ago. One more pit stop to get to the end here. And now it's the matter of will Thompson elect to be patient? Looks like he'll keep the run balanced this time. Along with Thompson, and you can see just trying to keep things balanced as the clouds start to really cover turns 1 and 2.
Track temperature earlier, we're talking about 119. These clouds roll in, it's down to 109 Fahrenheit. And I mean, that is significant for these cars. We have another pass up at the front as Maskey goes around the outside of Bennett.
Yeah, but a leapfrog him on the outside. Now will Thompson try and go for the leapfrog? We'll have to see. Not enough speed to carry on forward. Dead even draft lock that time down into the corner as they'll pass by Trevor Bobrovsky, who has completed his service. And now they're back up to the race lead proper.
And these guys have been fighting so hard the entire race. So fun to watch, and I'm really looking forward to these final 44 laps as we tick them down. About half an hour remaining, and it's going to be so much fun if we keep things green. These guys have been fighting hard the entire race.
Yeah, Matsky was very fast in the first half of the race after having to charge his way through the field early on. Had to recover from an incident off of turn 4. That was the biggest incident of the race. Now Bennett, he's been one of the drivers that has stayed up at the front just about the entire day. The furthest he's been back today, in fact, I think has been around 4th position, Christian. Bennett's been locked into the top 5 all day.
Yeah, he's just fought the entire time to make sure he stays in that grouping and not fall back at all. It's not at all really surprising to me to see that this group of 3, who I kind of sort of consider the specialists of the field, have actually used their kind of existing knowledge to build that gap that they now have to the next group of 3. And that's really where the guys who know the car and the circuit well make gains during the race. You know, they have a better handle on the strategy. They're able to create gaps on pit cycles and push the limits more than everybody else. And it's just that one little thing of just taking a little bit less fuel because you know that you don't need it allows you to break away from the group, and it's totally changed who we've actually got fighting for the win. Well, I say totally changed. It hasn't for 2 of them, but Riley Thompson's been able to play himself in, whereas drivers such as Thomas Geisler, Pete Herod, and Sam Harper are now kind of out of the question.
And we're in that strategic part of the race absolutely now, to where these drivers need to figure out, okay, when do we come in? Because we're only 12 laps away too, Christian, from the money lap.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what it's going to come down to now. It's going to come down to this last pit stop and getting it absolutely perfect. You know, just making the pit cone as tight as possible in terms of speeding and not speeding, but obviously getting it down, getting it parked in the box straight, not getting any kind of a poor entry in that sense, and then cutting it as fine as you possibly can in terms of how much fuel you need to the end of the race.
Lap traffic ahead, it's Beltrami Salami once more, who will let by your race leaders. Riley Thompson lost a lot of time as a result of that traffic, though, had to lift off the throttle on the exit of the short chute.
These guys really have stepped up the pace. The last time for Tim Matsky was a 41.0. To give some context, the drivers in that second group, Thomas Geisler 41.2, Pete Herod 41.17, Sam Harper 41.24. So this group of 3 at the front are now really kind of starting to unleash the pace that they have.
Yeah, the pace that's been incredible from these competitors. 40 to go. Let's take a look at that group that you were referring to. You can see them all lined up in a group of 3. And they've reached the traffic and nearly ran over the traffic. Got a little bit dicey there with Beltrami that time. Let's take a look at the replay as Handsome Pete nearly got into the back wing that time through the corner.
You can see that he's kind of under a lot of pressure actually from Thomas Geisler. But then as they come down into turn 1, see, actually just, I think, caught Bob Beltrami by surprise. I don't think he was expecting him to catch him as fast as they did.
Yeah, that was heads-up awareness from the drivers behind, too. You have to give credit to them to be able to dodge. Beltrami is running lap times 4 seconds slower than the rest of the field at the moment, 26, after being involved in contact. For the race lead, though, Bennett now ready to pounce. Potentially, he's within a car length once more.
It's going to be interesting to watch. I've been watching Bennett the last couple laps, and Oh, I thought that Maskey might have been just driving down to pit road, but no, instead he's just going to do everything he can. And a bump there from Bennett. Incredible.
And that sets up Riley Thompson for the race lead. Riley Thompson to the point. My goodness.
That was out of nowhere. I don't know if Bennett lost it off the corner and Bennett didn't know where to go, but Thompson all the way around on the outside.
Yeah, that was very weird indeed. I think we'd have to see a replay to actually know what happened right there. But it looked like Matsky kind of slowed up. Bennett kind of pushed him down the straight, but it just didn't really work at all and handed the advantage to Riley Thompson, swept around the outside and took the lead.
See on the replay, this is where he starts to slow up, and I'm wondering what's going on here. Bennett then bumps him right there, and Thompson just drives on by and waves goodbye.
Yeah, very, very weird indeed, because it wasn't like Matsky got a poor exit onto the straightaway or anything like that. And there really shouldn't be any fuel concerns here. That's when you kind of see people doing things like that, that's normally because they're trying to force you to pass them so that then they can save fuel behind you. But he shouldn't need to do that because he actually was one of the drivers who'd come in and had the advantage in terms of strategy on the prior run, so he should have the most fuel of anybody in this group.
Yeah, I did go ahead and ride that last corner on board with Matsky, and it sounded he was definitely off the throttle. He was down to about 4, maybe 5 lights lit up on the rev limiter, so with plenty of throttle still left to give in that car. I think that he was trying to let Bennett by, and Bennett didn't want any part of that, and that just opened the door for Thompson to take both positions.
Helped out that second pack though. They were about 4.3 seconds behind, and now they're only 3.7 behind. Unfortunately for Pete Harrod, that's too far back in terms of getting any kind of positive drafting effect, but it is allowing them to close the gap a little bit when there's checkups in this lead 3.
Keep in mind that the fuel saving in the draft is big, so that may have been a bit of a factor, but somebody has to lead here. You can't just say, you know what, let's let, I'm not even sure, lead. The pace car lead, I don't know. An invisible car. Somebody has to lead.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, and that's something that we've seen in the official 500s in the past, where when the fuel is tight, drivers will get really aggressive in trying to slow the pace down and trying to force people to pass them so they're not the leader.
Keep in mind that on top of things too, that we're talking about potentially tenths of a second here on fuel. Fuel is time with these cars too, Christian. That's probably a talking point for some of these competitors thinking, okay, let's try and stretch as long as we can so we don't have to fill up as much in the tank, and then in turn save time. We've seen how big that was for some of these cars to gain the advantage over the rest of the field.
Yeah, for sure, that's definitely something that could be going on, and that's why I actually feel like Tim Matsky's possibly in the best place of anybody, because if, for example, he was able to top off right there where the others weren't, he can take less fuel on his final stop. He might come out significantly far ahead. If he comes out, say, 1.52 seconds ahead, it's going to be hard to run him down, and that might be what he's trying to play for here.
Couple laps away from the money lap, Chad.
Bennett down the front straightaway that time had such an incredible run, but he was just too far back and it got stalled out by the time that they got to the turn in for turn number 1. A pass for the lead there, Matt's getting around Thompson, and it looks like Bennett's about to do the same. Does he have enough momentum to get both of them? No, but he's going to have an incredible run here to turn number 3 and set him up probably to get him into turn number 1 next time.
They are really slow, though. Relative to the next group behind them, it's flipped around. Henry Bennett's last lap was a 41.4, Riley Thompson 41.39, Tim Matsky 41.28. In the group behind, Thomas Geisler 41.09. So the gap between them is coming down. It's now 2.5 seconds from back to Pete Harrod in 4th.
Heck, Ryan Mayer last time by was a 41 lap, but Sam Harper 40.8, making up 0.7 of a second just that one last lap alone.
I'll say it was 4 seconds back they were at one point. Now 2.5 indeed, as they continue to swap back and forth now for the 4th position. The swap draft picked them up another 10th that time by. And Riley Thompson now definitely going to be in the line for the most potential save, as Handsome Pete Wants to swap again. Chance to close up a little bit more time. 1 lap away from the money lap to be able to get the green light to make it on fuel.
Don't know that anybody's going to want to come in right away. Just with the way that this green flag run has gone, I think that some of these guys are going to try to stretch it as far as they possibly can and try to just make it basically a quick splash and go from here to the finish. These guys can still make another about 15 or so laps, or maybe 10 to 15 laps until they have to pit one more time.
They can stretch it for some of these drivers as far as approximately 6 to 8 laps. Sam Harper has elected to come in this time by. So the 52 has come in.
For the alternate strategy here, he's going to pit as early as possible, knowing that pretty much filling it up from this point is going to make him safe. But obviously quite a high risk strategy. We've seen drivers go a lap down doing this and then get trapped there if a caution comes out. So it's a big play, but it does mean that he breaks himself out of this group. He gets to run around on his own, for better or worse, and that's going to be what he's going to go for and try and win the race, as we see Henry Bennett's coming down.
Henry Bennett comes in with 29 laps to go. Remember, some of these drivers put in a little less fuel in the last stint. And now we'll see what the timing's going to be. It was an 8-second stop, give or take, for Sam Harper.
Locking up his
that's gonna be a
tires.
good play for him, though. An 8-second stop is very fast.
Yeah, Bennett locking up his tires on the way into his pit box. Very aggressive with his pit entry. We'll have to see how long he is stationary. As you see, 8.0, Harper was stopped in his box. Coming up to that now, 8.4 for Bennett. Maybe just a little more fuel to get things rolling. He is back underway, coming out onto the access road now.
Got a bit of advantage over Harper, though, and keeps the advantage. Riley, Thompson, Thomas Geisler both came in this time, so the leaders are all coming in except for Matsky.
And I think this is one of those moves where the guys that are out in front just see one person go, and it just turns into follow the leader. Matsky now with the lead. He's got 2 seconds back to Harrod. Does he come in this lap? He works his way through turn number 4. Or through turn number 3 right now, into turn number 4. And he keeps things nice and tidy. He's going to stay out another lap.
How big is this going to be on the times, though, is going to be the big thing, because I've seen some drivers get reeled in quickly. How big of an impact will this be without any draft to impact him, Tim? For Tim, rather, Christian.
Well, I think if he's running around on his own, then he's okay. As soon as he's in the draft of somebody else, that's when it's going to start to hurt him. So at the moment, it looks good. And I did think that he probably was in a good spot relative to everybody else in terms of how much fuel he had in the car. But nobody knows is the honest answer. Like, nobody knows how this cycles out, because it all comes down to where you come out in traffic, who you come out with, is there anybody you can work with, how good your entry and exit was, and the truth of it is we're not going to know until everybody's cycled through.
Ashley Beard has come in this lap, but one thing to know, Riley Thompson cycled in front of Henry Bennett in the pit stop sequence, half a second quicker down the lane, and now Riley Thompson loses a spot to Bennett as Bennett gets the boost.
Using that draft every little bit of it. Did not even peek his nose till the very end of the back straightaway. And here's going to be Thompson with a run back at him.
Side by side with the swap draft. Matsky stayed out that time by. Now Thompson jumps up forward. Matsky now coming in this time by. So your race leader is in. The 79 comes in from the pits. Will he be in the battle with these two is the question. Made it 27 laps on the stint, needs 25 laps of fuel to make it to the checker flag as he's up on the jacks. Meanwhile, the other drivers have reached traffic and will pass by them on the outside. 7.9 seconds in the box for Matsky. Half a second, look at that. Quicker in the lane overall for Tim Matsky. He'll cycle potentially in front, if not right in the thick of things, Christian.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully for him, he's going to be actually far enough ahead that he's out of the draft. Don't think he's going to achieve that, but it's not going to be far off. He's close. They are going to draft up to him, but if he'd have just had another half second to a second, he might have been able to escape.
And Bennett right there as well, going to the outside, using every bit of slingshot that he can once again, and he's going to be right there on the back bumper coming out of turn number 4.
Here we go. 24 to go. Net race lead is on. Matsky. High side, bottom side. Bennett. Bennett in the 007. Now back up to the race lead.
Now what this comes down to is who makes the last pass. Sounds obvious, but what I mean by that is you're going to see a lot of swap drafting going on here, and whoever is able to commit to the last pass of the swap draft is pretty much certainly going to win the race unless they're trying to save something late on, but it's very hard to do that. I think it's advantage Tim Matsky right here because he has the freshest tires of this group, so by rights he should be able to make the last pass.
Being defensive here at Indianapolis is something very difficult to do because with the incredible runs that cars get and with the fact that there's walls on both sides of the track down the front straightaway, if you get that run just wrong, or you try to block just wrong as the front car, you could end up getting yourself and the car trying to pass you both towards the back end of the lead lap.
Back and forth they go for the swap, coming at 22 to go. Bennett, this time, swaps down the back straightaway. Matsky now back to second, and Thompson is backed off here. He's being a bit more patient here. What do you think Riley Thompson's play is here, Christian?
Honestly, I'm not sure because he's in a similar situation to Henry Bennett right here. He's actually got one lap fresher than Bennett, but it's going to be really difficult for him to pass Matsky if he doesn't try and get something done. Either that or he's just trying to stay connected and actually trying to save up a little bit so that when these two finish fighting, he might be able to make something happen, but I think it's just going to be really difficult for him no matter what. It looks like he's struggling to even actually stay close to them right now, but it might be by design. We have seen drivers do this. Obviously, you know that the two of them ahead are going to fight the entire way, so you're not really in danger of falling off the back of the group.
This is one of those things that has major implications throughout the race. Bennett has run 8 laps. He had the longest stop of these 3. Riley Thompson pitted 7 laps ago. He had the second longest stop. So basically, whoever pitted the longest ago, you obviously have to take more fuel to get to the end. But just the way that it maths out, it just turns out to be that much more time stationary can definitely cost you a little bit of time, as these guys are still fighting very hard for the lead.
It's getting difficult, though, for Bennett to actually pull these passes off. He barely made that stick going down into 1 that time. I think it's going to start swinging towards Matsky now. Matsky looks like he's able to easily pull off the passes. It looks like it's just getting harder and harder for Bennett to actually make them stick.
Bennett now trying to get the run to get the swap draft, and now Matsky doesn't want to go with it. He wants to go back and forth. Bennett still gets the run either way. Ross Banfield is coming this time by from the overall lead as Bennett takes the net lead away once more. 20 laps to go from Indianapolis. And now it's the matter of how things fare out amongst these competitors. As mentioned, the last pass going to be critical. Getting yourself in position to do so is going to be also very critical. Matsky with a big boost of speed down the back straightaway once more.
Yeah, but interestingly, he wasn't there to make the pass into 3. I'm wondering if he's just trying to see what happens when he lines up the pass down into 1. But I think he definitely saw, not the last time by, but the previous time, how difficult it was for Bennett to actually pull that pass on him. And I think that's why he went with the weave. He makes it stick down into 1 this time. We'll have to see if Bennett can fight back down into 3.
It's interesting for Thompson back in 3rd. He was very wide there through turn number 4 last time. Lost a ton of time and momentum. I'm not sure if he missed his turn in with how these guys are weaving or what his decision was to run that high. But these guys in front of him are battling so hard, he might have a chance to just inherit the lead if something happens between the two of them.
Now Matsky defends bottom. Bennett on top. Now back to the slide. Bennett now with the pole. Back to the inside as they go back and forth once more. Bennett will get the point at the stripe. 2 more drivers need to pit in front of them. Sintez Galindo and Bobrovsky. Then they get the overall lead back. Those drivers can stretch it only a couple more laps.
something to note, of course, here at Indianapolis, the start-finish line is not centered on the straightaway. It's actually further down towards turn 1 than it is towards the center of the track. And what that's going to do for these guys is whoever's the second, whoever's in the draft the longest, they're going to be able to build up more run and more weaving there from Bennett. But whoever can draft as much as they can and slingshot at the very last second, we could see a Marco Andretti Sam Hornish finish once again that we saw here about 15 years ago.
I remember that finish. It was a thrilling end to this race in the rear world. But will we see that here? We'll have to see. Bob Beltrami now out of the race. He was several laps down. Richie Hearn is also pitting this lap. Also, Vrabowski, the only driver yet to come in for service. Then it's back to the overall lead for these competitors. Matsky trying to defend high side this time as Bennett nearly scrapes the safer barrier.
That safer barrier, something that was invented here for Indianapolis first, and from there went out into the real world. Just another historical tidbit for you on this fantastic speedway. Another thing that was invented here are those caution lights set up around the racetrack. As they're passing almost side by side through turn number 2, but they're battling hard between Matsky and Bennett.
Everybody getting more and more aggressive now because it's coming down to that point where it's going to start getting extremely difficult to complete the passes. And whilst this is happening, it's not quite playing 4th, 5th, and 6th into the fight, but they can see it happening. They're on the same straightaway for the majority of the time.
3 seconds back at the moment is that pack at the moment, led by Hanson Peath and Thomas Geisler, Sam Harper, Ashley Beard, Ryan Mayer in that group. But you fall from the gearbox of Bennett. Bennett this time defends high, and now it's getting more frequent, these defensive lines going up to that 3rd groove. Matsky's trying to run up to the 4th groove just about. As you see, once more, they continue to try and shuffle around with Thompson trying to get up to that high groove and get himself in position. Side by side for the lead again. Matsky to the point. Vrabowski, meanwhile, has been able to stretch it now for 31 laps. He was now only 18 seconds ahead of the field. He continues to try and stretch it on the gas. We'll need a caution flag now for him to have the luck. We'll have to see. Likely has to come in this time. Would give that overall lead to Bennett, Matsky, and Thompson for their fight.
I'm surprised that Bennett's actually been able to hold on to this as much as he had. I really thought that the advantage would swing towards Matsky the longer they ran, but Bennett's been able to fight much more than I was expecting from him, actually, and he might be able to hold Matsky off here. I'm still not sure what the play is from Riley Thompson. He's just kind of lurking back there. He's not really made any aggressive moves. Matsky down to the inside again.
The pass by Vrabowski here. Now this is for the overall lead with 13 to go. Matsky able to get the swap once more to the point. That Manizzi racing machine has been very impressive throughout the race today, and now needs to try and defend once more if he so chooses so. We've seen how defensive he's gotten down the straightaways. Here he goes again. Bennett now to the high side. And Riley Thompson being asked by Bennett for help, but Thompson reporting too much downforce over the radio as they go side by side for the lead again.
That's one of those things about these cars I can't remember for sure not being in it at the moment. But in the real world, you can take that front downforce off and get the front end just a little bit looser as the run when you come into pit. I don't think that's a possible pit stop adjustment in these cars, which is unfortunate for Riley. He would love to be right up there with these guys.
That may be why, Christian, he's laying back here.
Well, actually, I believe that you can change both front and rear wing angles in the pit stop, but
yes,
at the same time, you can go the wrong way, and he might have done that. It just looks like he just doesn't pull up down the straights, but it's a fine balance, you know. When you're behind, you want downforce because that's what allows you to follow. You're going to obviously lose downforce when you're in the wake, so the more that you have on there, the more, well, the less effect, well, you're affected the same, but you can kind of follow what I'm saying in the sense of you've got more overall capability, so the wake doesn't affect you as much. Whereas you can trim it out and be really, really fast down the straights, but you basically won't be able to follow in the corners. And it actually kind of looks like what Riley's done is he's just got overall too much wing on, And even though he can follow in the corners, he can't get any run down the straight.
Huge moment there for Riley Thompson through turn number 3. You see that gap is huge between him and the 2 cars in front of him now. He just, and there comes the caution out the 35 in turn number 2. Unfortunately, that is Middleton into the wall on exit of turn number 1, just at the turn 2 entry.
So Neil Middleton from 15th position brings us under yellow, was side by side with Tom Drayling, and this changes everything.
Yeah, Thompson, as I was saying, into turn number 2 the last time by, just turned in too early. Had to lift a ton to stay out of the wall. This is the Middleton accident we're taking a look at here. But Thompson did a great job keeping it out of the wall, held down to 3rd, and that caution really saved him because he lost a ton of time. And there was contact there into the wall, and he just holds it up there the entire way around.
And as he stops along that wall, it's enough to trigger a caution flag and put us to a restart with under 10 to go. Thompson had also just about scraped the wall in turns 1 and 2, trying to push hard to keep with that pack. And now, what do you do, Christian, with you now having caution 16, and this one could be one of the final restarts of the race coming up?
You're looking at maybe 7 or 8 laps to go when it does go green, and it's a tough decision. It all depends on how many cars come down, because if 10 or 11 or so cars stay out, then obviously you have to stay out. The track position is king. But if everybody comes down with you, then you're in a great spot. Bennett does nearly go in and then changes his mind at the last second, so everybody looks like they're committing. A couple of drivers further back are going to come down and take tires, but the majority of our top 10 is staying out.
And I believe if you're Bennett, you're thinking, okay, just try to draw as many people behind me, come, just follow in behind. But when he saw nobody coming behind at the last second, pulling back out onto the track, for these guys at the tail end of the lead lap, this might just be their opportunity to take some wing off and kind of just hope that you can make up some spots from here to the end, because you got nothing to lose by pitting. You don't need fuel, but overall, I mean, you can just make some fine-tuned adjustments and see where things go.
Well, here's an interesting one. Because we're under 10 to go, it now means that lapped cars will drop to the end of the field, and we have 15 on the lead lap. So anybody who did pit there from the lead lap might actually be able to pull this off. The tire advantage is going to be significant. It's just a question as to if you have enough laps left to make it happen.
So those drivers are Bobrovsky, Baker, Drayling, who have all elected to come in and take service. Everybody else stayed out. And the race lead is between Matsky, Bennett, Thompson, Geisler, who is now within range again, Hanson Pete, Sam Harper, Ashley Beard, Brian Mayer, Eric Mickey, Sintez Galindo, your top 10. What a drive for the 11, by the way. Was a lap down at one point, was in the 20s much of the race. Now has a chance of a top 10, potentially.
And he's got some of the freshest tires there. He actually does have the freshest tires in the top 10. He pitted 9 laps ago compared to some of the leaders that pitted like Bennett 21 laps on this set.
Yeah, we don't really spoke much about Galindo, but he's obviously had a relatively quiet race, so to speak, but has got himself inside the top 10, has got good tires, as I said. Yeah, it looks like he might be able to even get up to the back end of the top 5, perhaps.
This time by, the lights are out. And now, how do you play this if you're the race leaders? Because this is going to get crazy. First you, Chad.
I think my strategy here, especially if you're a guy like Bennett or Thompson, you put your foot on the loud pedal, you keep your foot on the loud pedal, and you don't take it off, and you just turn left. That's all you can really do, is just hope and pray you get the timing just right, so where you get into the lead when you take the checkered flag.
I think it depends on where you are in the line. Obviously, if you're Tim Matsky, there's not really a lot you can do. You just got to keep doing what you were doing, which is essentially defending from Henry Bennett. I think Bennett's actually the one probably under the most threat, because he has to try and find a way around Matsky, and we've seen that passes for the lead tend to be happening on the bottom of the track, but if you're in the line, the pass is actually still on the top side. So I expect a really aggressive move by some drivers to the top, especially Riley Thompson, to try and get around Henry Bennett, get himself into that second spot. But we've also got some other drivers in the mix now who were kind of out of it, who were definitely wanting to make a play at this race. Pete Herod is obviously one of them. He was getting pretty frustrated that they were kind of off that lead group and had a couple of issues with lap cars kind of checking him up. Now he's got a chance again. I expect to see him be very, very aggressive, make some top line passes. I don't really see any passes happening on the bottom of the racetrack except for the lead, but I expect everybody behind to be fighting for the top.
Here we go. 7 laps to go from Indianapolis Motor Speedway for the 2021 edition of the Major Series European Pro Splits Indianapolis 500-mile race. The pace car is off. Matsky in control of the field. Stacking him up this time. Green flag is out, off and away.
A very late start there by Matsky, making sure everybody was stacked up. Nobody could get a solid run on him, as well as holding the outside. And not a great start there from Bennett, taking the second line in turn number 1. Have to see if he can't catch back up.
Now, though, the leader going to lose a lot of time here with the slipstream. Bennett already capitalizing to get to the point. Now, Geisler is taking advantage of Riley Thompson as well to try and jump up to third.
He's got that third position, but very close to the wall on the exit of turn number 3 for Geisler. But he's going to maintain that spot and caution out once again on the racetrack.
Big Rex Sakovic involved, one of the TFR cars as well.
And brings us under caution after a spin in front from Eric Mickey from the 9th position. It was with Sintez Galindo that made contact side pod to side pod, and then they piled up after.
And one of those things that we see with cars piling into wrecks at this point is iRacing has the new smoke model they released about a season or 2 ago. That's something we haven't really had to deal with much in Indianapolis. You're much more blinded, it feels like, coming through some of these corners. It's definitely made a change to how guys have to think about going through wrecks, just because of how long it lingers and how thick the smoke now is.
And now, as a result of that caution flag too, Christian, one last chance for the battle for the race win, because the next caution ends it.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see the same battle running down into turn 3 as we saw that time by. Obviously, this time it went to Bennett. He was able to get the run, dodge to the inside, and take the lead. But I don't think he's going to let Tim Matsky do the same move to him. I expect to see Bennett defend all the way down to the grass, force Matsky to go to his outside, and then maybe Matsky can kind of sweep around him through 3 and 4. But either way, they've now got somebody else in the mix. Thomas Geisler has moved his way back into contention for this race. He's managed to get himself back into 3rd. It's going to be interesting to see if he can do anything. I think probably he can, actually, but it's going to come down to what happens on the initial kind of pull on the restart. Tim Matsky was really quite smart with what he did there, holding it as long as he could. It meant that there was nobody behind kind of stacking up, making runs on the top side through 1 and 2, just because the pace is too slow to really make it work. You saw Bennett go defensive there, but he was kind of defending against nothing. There was never any runs kind of built up. But if you go earlier, there's a greater chance of those kind of sweeping passes on the top side from second on back. So it's a question as to who and what you want to fight as the leader, you know, because obviously with Bennett, he's going up against Matsky. He knows that if he does what Matsky did, then Matsky's going to have a big run on him down into 3, so maybe try something different. Maybe go early. Maybe hope that Matsky is under attack from Geisler.
And something that we saw a couple of cautions ago when Bennett was in the lead, he took a very interesting line down to the restart where he was basically almost against the inside wall, picked up the throttle very late and swept across the track to the outside to get the entry into turn number 1. So he has the experience here, trying to just set up different moves and see what different moves can do. And I think that was something similar that we saw from Matsky that time, where just kind of playing things a little different. We've seen him jump early and get a big gap out back, and this time he checked things up. So Bennett has some experience in these restarts in this race, seeing what the cars behind him can do, and it's going to be fun to watch as we come to 1 to go, to 1 to green this time by.
That will put us in a spot where it's a 3-lap shootout. And don't forget, we've seen how the draft fares in down the back straightaway for the race leader. This is going to need to be played out near perfectly for Bennett if he gets passed on by, because then it's going to become potentially a swap draft battle to the end, and we might get that finish Chad referred to. Christian.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's definitely a possibility. I mean, for sure, coming off of 4, I expect that we're going to see somebody at least try and pull out and make a move. That said, it's difficult to do it. You know, you gotta kind of be there, tucked up right with them through 3 and 4, and obviously with the aero wash, that's it's not quite easy to do on, say, the first lap, but it's possible. You know, you're not at full speed, you're able to be close on the entry to 3. As the laps kind of tick down, it's harder to do that. And so if you've done 1 lap at full speed and the second time you come down to 3 and 4, the chances are you're probably not as close as you were the previous time. So it's going to come down to if you can actually be there to have that opportunity. I think the best way of maybe trying it is if you can be close on entry to 3, run to the high side, follow them through the corner on 3 and 4, and then tuck right back in behind them, and then try and pop out at the last minute on the run to the line.
So to reset your top 10 for the final restart of the race, Bennett, Matsky, Geisler, Hanson Pete, Thompson, Harper, Beard, Mayer, Sintez Galindo, Banfield, your top 10. Fresh tires, 11th on back from Baker, Dreiling, Mickey. Also, George Gruber is in that grouping. Dallas Pataska has recovered to 15th. Puteklis recovers to 16th. Those are among the drivers, all looking to scrap. 13 of them are on the lead lap for the final restart of the race. Bennett already moving to the middle line for this one. iRacing pace car is off. The 2021 Major Series Indy 500 has 3 more laps to go, and it's back underway, 7.5 miles to go.
Next flag ends the race, and we are clean and green up front. All 4 of the top 4 guys, including Pete, getting clean and away. And very defensive line, Bennett protecting the outside.
He's giving a big run to Geisler, though.
Here we go, Matsky now going 3 wide for the race lead. To the bottom side goes Geisler. Can he make it stick? He gets to the point. Matsky up to 2nd. Bennett shuffled to 3rd. Now Matsky tries to get to the high side as they go through 3 and 4, coming at 2 to go.
He's going to school out both of them, though.
Bennett, the big loser there from 1st to 3rd, and he then through turn number 4 stays to the outside, gets all the momentum he can, and that's going to be the race.
Caution is out as that will give it to Tim Matsky. Dallas Pataska involved as he ends up hitting the wall in turn 4 and brings us under yellow to close things out. What a finish. Let's take a look at the GSRC replay and look at these closing laps. And closing stage came down to a nose cone down the front. See how close it got at the timing of the caution flag.
Some disagreement between the drivers over the radio. It sounds like they weren't sure who had the position when the caution came out, and it was very, very close between Matsky and Geisler.
Bennett, though, shuffled to 3rd on the restart.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as the leader on the restart, it was always going to be that way, you know. When he didn't cover down to the grass, it kind of left that opening there, but he was fighting Matsky, and Geisler just had that huge run. It looked like Bennett tried to check the field up a little bit coming off a 2 to try and stunt those runs out, and it worked for Tim Matsky in terms of it slowed him down, but it didn't check up the run that Geisler had, and it was Geisler who went to his inside and really kind of cemented the 3rd place for him.
In 2018, it was Kurt Krum. In 2019, it was Christian Challoner. And in 2020, it was Jan Valverde. In 2021, the Major Series European Pro Splits Indianapolis 500-mile race will go to Maniti Racing's Tim Matsky. He wins at the Brickyard for the 2021 edition of this event.
incredible run from plenty of these guys. You have to feel for Geisler. He had the move. He was inside and had it by maybe the entire front wing Matsky did when he got to the line. Just an incredible finish there and a great shootout between all of these guys.
Already several drivers peeling off to celebrate. Matsky able to take the victory under caution in this one. Several more start to light up their tires and burn things out. What a finish, Christian.
Yeah, absolutely, and I kind of do feel for Henry on that one. Obviously, he kind of took the lead on the prior restart, but he must have known that it was always going to be difficult to hold on to it. But yeah, I mean, really, it came down to just the timing of the caution, I think, that decided that. If it had been maybe half a second later, it would have gone to Geisler. If it had, obviously, when it went to Tim Matsky. So, yeah, I mean, congrats to both of them, really. Well, all three of them, honestly. They kind of put on a great show at the front. Geisler was really, really impressive. Matsky was impressive the whole race long, and Bennett was obviously in control for the vast majority of the race as well.
Take a quick break. Post-race coverage coming up in just a few moments. You're watching the Global Sim Racing channel for coverage of the major series, Indianapolis 500-mile race. Welcome back to GSRC's coverage of the Major Series in its European Region Pro Split for the Indianapolis 500-mile race for 2021. It ended under caution, but in the end, it's Tim Matsky who takes home the checker flag over Thomas Geisler. Then, Henry Bennett rounds out your top three. Handsome Pete finished in fourth today after starting 23rd, while Riley Thompson got shuffled to fifth on the final restart. Sam Harper recovered to sixth after falling back in some of the green flag runs, with Ryan Mayer to seventh. Ashley Beard finished in eighth, Sintez Galindo finished in ninth, and Ross Banfield rounded out your top 10 today, Chad.
Eric Mickey finished in 11th, followed by Tom Drayling, then David H. Baker and George Gruber in 14th, then Uldis Patekis in 15th. Joshua Wolf and Richie Hearn, Ray Partridge, Neil Middleton, and Mitchell Sakowitz wrap up your top 20, Christian.
Trevor Bobrovsky had a stint at the end part of the race where he was actually in contention until he had to pit, but unfortunately comes home 3 laps down in 21st. Dallas Pataska, involved in that last incident that ended the race there, comes home 22nd with Rob Gall and Cordell Colon behind him in 23rd and 24th, 6 laps down. Kurt Crum was 8 laps down in 25th. Obviously big championship implications for him. Bob Beltrami, we saw him struggle with the car for the majority of the event after a lot of damage early on for him, and unfortunately comes home 40 laps down in 26th. Travis Henderson retired 72 laps down in 27th. Isaac Snyder, we saw have 2 big incidents and comes home in 28th. Tim Claeson's another championship contender back there in 29th. David Loschke back there in 30th, 107 laps down.
Colin Belval finished 31st after starting on the outside front row with Colin Martzoff 32nd. Darwin Mites 33rd with Brian Barney, David Monerwich, and Dawson Bronk rounding out your entries today. Bronk only made it 8 total laps on the lead lap. Now, Chad, want to turn to you. Your thoughts on how this race played out today, especially with the closing stages and that thrilling green flag run.
Oh, I so wish that we could have had a green flag run there. That last 5-lap shootout would have been incredible to watch between Matsky, Geisler, Bennett, even Thompson and Herod. Just those 5 guys were so competitive throughout the event, and it was going to be so much fun to watch them battle. But unfortunately, that caution came out further back in the pack. Matsky, what a fantastic run. Geisler from 35th, not setting a qualifying time all the way up to 2nd as well. What an incredible finish at an incredible speedway. And these guys always put on a show because, it's such a fantastic track for these cars. It's obviously, designed one around the other, and it's just been so much fun to watch this race, whether it's on iRacing or in the real world.
Your thoughts on how this race played out, Christian?
Yeah, I would have to agree. Obviously, the end part of the race, especially the last quarter to the last third, was really, really good. We had green flag pit stops and a lot of strategic battles there, which was great to see. Unfortunately, the beginning of part of the race was a little bit messy. We obviously had some championship contenders out early, which was unfortunate. They were kind of behind for the rest of the day, but yeah, a couple of guys were really, really impressive. Obviously, Thomas Geiser came back from 35th to finish 2nd. Depending on where the timing ended, he might have even won it. Tim Matsky is, again, another driver, obviously won the race. Very impressive all day long. And got a feel for Henry Bennett on losing out the win after contending for the entire race, but still comes home 3rd, so can't be too upset.
On that note, we'd like to thank you for tuning in for tonight's exciting action from the virtual Indianapolis Motor Speedway on iRacing. We'd also like to thank the Major Series for organizing this amazing series. I'd also like to take the time to thank the companies who provide the software and hardware for our broadcast listed up on screen. With digital thanks to Jude LeWan, who provides our wonderful music. See the screen for how to get a hold of more for great work. Thanks as well to the team today in chat, Christian and Sean. If you'd like to find out more about GSRC, including upcoming races, you can find it at globalsimracingchannel.com. If you'd like to help support the channel, you can check the merchandise for sale at gsrc.storeandvy.com, or you can check out our social media on Twitter at GSR Channel, Facebook at Global Sim Racing Channel, and Instagram at GSRC_Grand. Don't forget to head over to YouTube page and hit that big red subscribe button as well as the notification bell so you don't miss a moment from the Global Sim Racing Channel. The next race goes over to Le Mans. That will take place June 20th. Be sure to tune in then for that coverage at 11:45 a.m. Eastern Time on Sunday, June the 20th. That is 3:45 p.m. GMT. And don't forget, the American region takes place later on this evening. That takes place at approximately 7:45 p.m. Eastern Time for pro action for the Americas. We also have upcoming races for other series listed on screen, so be sure to check those out and mark them down in your calendar. But until next time, race clean, race hard, and we'll see you on the track.